like what I thought I should be looking for was that still image in a magazine of dog staunchly on point and 10 feet off its nose. There's the grouse. The dog stops and stands there, and I circle around and walk in and gently nudge the bird out of the grass. It flies up, right? Like that is an image on a wall. There's one behind me over there, right?
I was just about to say the RGS print that we're all familiar with.
Exactly, and that does happen, but it's a moving masterpiece. The dog, the bird, the cover, being able to read the dog and follow that dog's through relocations as the bird runs through cover and moves ahead of the dog. Early on, I'm only looking for that one mental picture where a dog is perfectly still and I walk in and flush the bird. But to even believe after the dog relocates 3 or 4 times, like, is a grouse really
right.
running ahead of this dog and we're eventually going to stick with it and get this thing pointed? I mean, now just by brute force, like I've seen it happen enough times where I know, but it's still always a constant, like, trust the dog, keep going.
Trust the hunter with the longest nose.
Letting it play out, being more of an observer than a know-it-all that I'm going to walk in and flush this bird right in front of the dog's nose, taking a back seat a little bit, sort of letting it play out, and then constantly trying to put yourself in a position. Cheers, dude.
Cheers. Welcome to another October in the Northwoods. Or I guess I should say thanks for welcoming.
Welcome back to Grouse Camp.
Yeah, the fire post-hunt celebration, if you want to call it that, it looks a little different this year. It's storming outside, so we're here by the good old trustworthy wood stove.
Yep. I don't know what model that is, but I've been told it's a nice one. It does the job.
Top of the line.
Yeah.
All right. It's keeping us warm and dry when it's cold and wet outside. I say it was a post-hunt celebration. I guess celebration probably isn't the right word for it, but we moved a lot of grouse.
I will use the word celebration because it is October 14th today, and today was one of the first days that really, really felt like grouse season. Like we've had warm conditions and super dry conditions, and maybe we'll talk about this, but we got some rain over the weekend. And so when you and I connected this afternoon, it was sort of a partly cloudy sky, that bright sort of October blue with some golden sunshine. It was the middle of the afternoon, cool, and there was moisture in the woods. And we hit the ground and we started moving birds right away, and it didn't stop for like an hour and 20 minutes. And none of those birds made it out of the cover with us, but it felt like grouse season today, and so I'm celebrating, buddy.
So it sounds like it's been kind of a slower than normal or slower than the season that you hoped for, but that's just part of it. The conditions are different every year, and I know last year in a lot of ways for a lot of people in different areas it was kind of a banger year. This year, hearing mixed results, but you're kind of hearing the same justifications or the reasoning wise, dry, hot, all the things that you listed. But there was something a little different in the air this morning, because I came up a few days ago, checked out a cover dog trial, and it was just gloomy, nasty, rainy, whatever. But this morning felt a little different. You woke up, there was frost on the ground.
Did you guys have like crystally frost where you were at?
Oh yeah. We were almost ice skating on the deck coming out of the house, and it was interesting. We went out a little too early this morning, but you got to do what you got to do when you have people trying to dance around work and whatnot. But to your point, it felt great this morning. Like, you don't want to go out to hunt in a t-shirt and being like, oh, it's comfortable, because once you start moving, then it's really too hot. And the ticks here in Wisconsin this year, man, they seem to be a little worse this year than normal.
Yeah. You got into them like in your morning hunt.
Yeah.
How about at the dog trial where you guys just...
No.
I mean, you weren't running dogs, but you didn't have them all over your pants or anything.
No, but that with the cover dog trial, you don't really get off the trail, or at least unless you're running or you're a participant. So we were kind of a single file line almost on a trail, kind of looking out. So I never really left the trail during the trial, but I did overhear other people saying the same thing. And
I don't know like what factors. Ticks come out in the spring. They kind of seemingly fade away during the heat of the summer, and then that fall period they sort of come back. So I don't know if there's like a sweet spot for them, and I'm not really keen on like what moisture levels do it. But today was my first hunt in Wisconsin this year, and I typically find that this area is worse for ticks than some of the areas I hunt in Minnesota. And I just what I pay attention to is like there's certain areas where if I'm hunting here, ticks are not as bad. Really, the Arrowhead region of Minnesota, I feel like the ticks are not as bad as some of these other central Minnesota. What I find in Wisconsin, I don't know how much rhyme or reason there is to it, but yeah, we didn't see a whole lot today, but we didn't have a ton of woods time. But it's tick season.
It's tick season. Hopefully the cold weather, long story short,
Mm-hmm.
comes, knocks them down, and you're not coming as many ticks off the dogs as what everybody is so far.
I to cut you off there, I was asking about the frost because I knew it was going to get cool last night. In where I live in Duluth, we have the big Lake Superior. This time of year, it insulates us a little bit from some of those cool temps. So the lake warms up gradually over the summer. It's cooling down now, but it warms up and it takes a long time for it to cool down. So when the temperatures start to drop in the fall, 5-10 miles inland, you'll get those significant temperature drops, get that hard frost. When I woke up this morning and went outside, it felt like it was just at the cusp of getting real crystally.
Okay.
Like I could see the grass and stuff, and there was dew and it was glistening, but it had already pretty much turned to like all dew and moisture. So I don't think we got that hard frost, but I'm sure here at the cabin it probably was.
Yeah.
It cooled down a lot more.
Yeah, and I mean we were thawing out trucks and thawing out windows and all that fun stuff. The stuff that like it. I always say that when you first start a hunt, you want to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like just uncomfortable, just like, oh man, if I had that jacket or just that light pullover, I'll be comfortable. Then when you start walking, it's all good. But that's what it felt like from the moment I got out. I'm like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but a good uncomfortable, if you will.
Yeah.
But I got out there kind of early, and like I said, and we still moved a few grouse, and then linked up with you, and we went in that one cut, and we should have had a bird out of that.
Have.
I mean, there was too many birds that gave us a few looks, and I think that uncharacteristic, for the both of us, neither one of us was ready at any of them. But I think Hartley deserved a bird on the ground on that run.
Yeah, he found us a few. That first one we flushed, I don't think we were more than maybe 100, 150 yards into the cover.
Yeah,
it was a wild flush. Hartley was off over here, and that cover we were in, all the grass is still up again. Talking about frost, we have not had enough frost to like knock down the weeds and stuff, but there's so many little patches there's winterberry in there, and there's raspberry, and I mean there's a ton of places where those birds could be hiding, and we basically were walking by the first one, and one shot out, and I got a glimpse of it shortly before you shot, and we didn't hit that one, and then it was kind of like grouse. And like we got some dog work. Hartley bumped a couple. The birds were clearly running because Hartley a perfect scenario for Hartley is he's running through the woods, bell stops, you walk in, and he's got the grouse right there under his nose. And he does that with pretty good consistency. He can relocate, but if it gets to be too much of a running grouse, the chances of him maybe getting a little too close on that relocate kind of go up. And so we had a few of those, and then just maybe a reflush here, reflush there. But we were in birds that whole loop. And
there was that one contact that he had that he relocated 3 or 4 times though. I mean, he did it, and I want to say he was. I don't know. He was over that 100-yard mark because I think it's fun when you hunt with other people's dogs, how quick you can start picking up on that particular dog's patterns.
Yep.
And I think I even asked you, like, hey, am I reading this right? Like when he's normally around like that 70, 75-yard mark, 60 yards. But if you look down and you see he's over 100 yards, he's working something.
Yep.
And it seemed like every time he hit that 100-yard mark, sure enough, wait a minute, and bing, you're going in and getting a grouse. And then we also had a couple come out off the roost, which we flushed a bunch of big fat birds too. Like
we did.
If we were ready, we had big enough targets for sure. We should have had one of those dinosaurs on the ground though.
Yeah. I think they were. For whatever reason, they were showing a tendency to run, because that's the other thing I would say about Hartley. Like if a grouse sits there, he's not moving. Like he will sit there until I get there. And so his kind of eagerness to move on these birds was kind of telling me who has I've hunted over this 10-year-old dog a lot. Those birds were moving, and he was moving with them, and yeah, we just could never get everybody in position and seal the deal. But
Yeah.
we found birds, and probably I could summarize my season at this point in very simply and just say, like, I've had way too many hunts in t-shirts at this point. Like today, I had long sleeves on and I never overheated, and we were moving birds, so it was a nice walk in the woods. And then our golden hour got stolen by like some rain. It was like this perfect afternoon. We thought we had all the way till sunset, and this kind of rain spitting came in, and wind, a little bit of wind, and some clouds, and the day totally transformed in about 45 minutes.
Yeah, very quickly. I mean, from the moment that we kind of left to go back out on the last walk from here to the parking area, which was, I don't know, 5-10 minutes tops down the road.
Yeah.
Completely different shift, but it wasn't just the rain on the shift. Like, it was pretty interesting walk to close out the day of typical, like, I would say my luck here of late, especially. But it was an interesting walk to where it's, I wanted to get the puppy on the ground.
Yep.
Puppy run, not anything fantastic, but you got to get them out. You got to get them running the woods. You got to get them loving all of it. And, yeah, we were going, and man, we were going down the trail a little ways. Like you said, it's raining, and all of a sudden he sticks a nice little point. I mean, you were like, "Oh, here we go."
First thing I remember is, like, a minute out of the truck, we heard drumming.
Yes.
So we got grouse drumming in the fall drumming, males drumming. They're competing for territory. So we're thinking, all right, birds are in here. And I'm just like, again, this is my first hunt around the cabin. We just moved a bunch of birds, so we hit the ground and start walking in this spot right near here. I usually hunt it once a year, and it's a nice big cover. And so I hear birds drumming in there right away. I'm like, all right, good deal. And we go along, and Woody's working, and I'll let you.
Yeah.
I don't think anything happened between. He was birdie a couple times. He was very taking his time, like figuring it out, and neither you or I are in a hurry. We're just walking.
We know it's a puppy walk.
The puppy, but you had told me right at the truck you wanted, if a bird gets up, we want to shoot a bird for this pup. So we were kind of like trying to definitely not miss any easy opportunities.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people hearing that, if they listen to me on a regular basis, they're going to be like, hold up, you're shooting any bird with a puppy? Yes. When we're building drive and we need to connect the dots and get excited for them to go search and hunt, it's just like, yeah, this is something that, I've always tried to do is like, let's try and shoot a bird as fast as we can. But like Kyle Warren really kind of opened my eyes to that last year when he was working one of his younger pups. He was like, the trick is like, get a grouse in the vest as soon as possible, because if your dog does go out there and point its first grouse and you shoot and miss and you can't reward that, you at least have the grouse in your vest that you can then produce and still reward them.
Yeah.
And he, even if you have a dead grouse from camp or the day before or something, that can take its place. But that's why it's just like, yes, we're drive building here, and he's been gun broke at the house, or I obviously wouldn't be telling you just shoot over the dog. Right. So take that in context. But it was funny, we were walking down the trail, and I was like, I think you're gonna, if we can see a point out of him on this, I think you're gonna dig his back leg point. As a lot of people associate that front leg up, and he's got this neat little interesting like back leg thing that apparently his dad does, his sire.
Easy.
So so I sent a picture to Kyle of the
so he like does that consistently?
Apparently Easy will do it if he's close to the bird, is what Kyle says. Like if he's super close, that back leg will come up. But so far Woody's doing it on all of them. And so it's kind of neat to watch. Well, fast forward just a few more minutes down the path and the trail, and guess what? He goes on point, and I even said, "Look at that back leg."
Yes, I remember you saying that.
And you're on the kind of to his left, and I go circle around to his right, and we're kind of getting ourselves, because I mean he's pointing something.
It was tight quarters.
Yes.
Like if there was a bird there, it was going to happen.
Yes.
Right now.
It was clear and unmistakable. Like there's something here.
Yep.
And that something wasn't feathered, it was quilled.
Yes.
And so the dang English puppy decided that he wanted to be a German puppy for the day, and and I'm glad that you said that, because I was circling around trying to get a good angled shot, and you said it's a small porcupine, and it took a second for it to register with me, because when I'm in like, all right, we're gonna shoot the dog's first grouse, it took me a second to come out of that frame of mind, and sure enough, he's sitting there pointing it, and as you move in on a young puppy that's pointing. Here's a tip for people that are hunting young puppies on, hopefully on birds and not porcupines.
Yep.
Don't crowd the puppy on point. Give him as much space as you can, or else he's going to crash in. Well, in this case, I want to get him away from the porcupine, of course. So it's like I'm going in, but if I went running in and trying to like dive and snag him or something, he's just going to dive in even quicker. So it's like I'm slowly just trying, and of course he breaks, and it's like he gets just a little taste, a little sample, and I mean, if it was 10 quills in his mouth, maybe
probably not,
not even that, probably.
Yeah.
But so he got his first porcupine experience out of the way. So all my other dogs took years. Woody's ahead of schedule.
He is.
He's not as patient as the other ones.
Yeah,
so.
that was. It was. I think we handled it right. Like to give folks an idea. This was like It was close quarters. You were on the other side of him. I was there. I was kind of slowly walking in. Like there's a raspberry patch there, so I'm thinking what's going through my head is, okay, we came up on the spot pretty quick. There could be a grouse there that we just came right up on. There's a nice raspberry patch here, and we're in nice little aspen cover. And then, the clock is ticking in my head, and it's like,
turns to woodcock.
Grouse is probably going to be gone. Okay, maybe there's a woodcock under here. And I'm just like slowly creeping forward, giving you time to circle. And you and I are not more than 10 yards apart. Like we're right on top of the puppy. And then I kind of get where the puppy's just below me. And then I look, and I mean, 4 or 5 feet in front of the pup's nose, like I see this little basket soccer ball size porcupine, and then I'm like, it's a small porcupine. And again, to what you said, I had a very similar thing happen with Rose when she was a pup. I kind of told you on the trail, and same deal. Like you're just trying to, like, if it was a first time dog owner, you might like frantically do something, and this is like kind of the takeaway, but we both sort of just like, all right, super calm, watch our behavior.
The dog's on point, waiting for us to do something.
Yes. Yep. And I kind of put my gun down there, like thinking I could, like, the butt of my gun to like try to like create some sort of a wall or something. And you slowly made your way, and like we were like a split second away from you having your hand on his collar, but he went in and got a couple quills. So.
But I was close enough to where it's like, he made contact, but I barely pulled him off.
Yeah.
And so hopefully he got the message, whether it was from the porcupine or even my hand jerking him out of there, and then the quills hopefully it resonated enough with him to where he's like, I don't like those.
Yeah.
I told you afterwards, I'm like, I had the tracking collar on. I probably could have used the e-collar to do it, because I guarantee you somebody's sitting here thinking, well, why not just you? And I could have, but it's a 5-month-old pup. And, while in that moment, more than likely, it would have been safe to say that he would have associated everything with that porcupine.
Yeah.
I haven't collar conditioned anything else with that dog, and I don't want that dog's first impression of the e-collar being, spicy porcupine.
Yeah.
So, but what was interesting is, came off again, not many quills. I pulled out most of them literally by just my gloved hand.
Yeah.
Had to get the forceps out for one small one inside of his mouth. But what was interesting is, like, right after that, as soon as we started going, and we got maybe, 10, 20 yards down the trail, like, you look up and a bear crosses the path.
Maybe 30 yards ahead of us, I just see black body going right across the trail. Like, oh, there's a bear.
Yeah. And you look at me, you stop, it's raining. We just had the porcupine, you had the bear, and we also saw like how many piles of coyote crap that we see everywhere. And you're like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I think this is one of those, like, we just need to take one of the signs. Not all of them, but let's turn around and
the
start working our way
collective
back.
signs here.
Yeah.
Which is getting to be a pattern with us.
Yeah, it is.
The last time we were in the woods together, we had to turn around.
Last year it was wolves. This year we got coyote sign, porcupines, and bears. I don't know if there's anything else on this
mountain lion.
Do y'all have them up here?
Yeah, there's some trail camera photos that would suggest that we do. They will pass through. People around the lake here have claimed to have seen them. I have not, but there have been confirmed trail cam sightings in this county. And even I was just going through an article. This is like a total tangent, but the Minnesota Volunteer, it's this little conservation, little booklet that comes out. I don't know if it's quarterly. It's a really neat little nature magazine that's put out by the Minnesota DNR. There is a guy in there. Actually, some people might know him on Instagram. I don't know his handle, but his name's like Ryan Panisi or something. He sets up these not trail cams, but really, really high quality camera traps.
Okay.
He calls them, right? So he gets really cool images. We'll have to look up his account because it's worth a follow. But he does everything in the Arrowhead of Minnesota, North Shore. And I was just looking at this with my son the other night. There's a amazing shot of a mountain lion on the North Shore of Minnesota. So
it's a game camera that you can actually trust.
Yes. And this is in the Minnesota DNR magazine and everything. So we've had sightings in Minnesota with trail cams now. It's like there's no denying it.
So if y'all are going to get mountain lions, they need to do a better job of clearing out these porcupines, because those are the only predators that I'm aware of that can actually successfully take out the porcupines, from my understanding.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so from what I understand, I'm sure somebody will call bullshit on me on this, but from my understanding, they actually know how to flip a porcupine over and get at them on the correct side.
Yeah.
I can't recall the source or any. I may have heard it on
Sounds
a
like
podcast.
something
Who
my
knows?
sons would tell me after watching an episode of Wild Kratts or something.
Yeah, Raylan's really big on the animal documentaries now, so who knows? I don't know what kind of documentary she's watching right now, but high hopes for tomorrow. Weather forecast looks good. We're kind of primed. We kind of have the I don't know the high torque machines with Rose and Quinn ready to. Yep. I mean, they're just chomping at the bit,
ready to go.
Yeah, they're really ready to go. Rachel, man, I've only run her for 30 minutes so far since being up here, so she's ready to go. Yeah, I think tomorrow's shaping up to be a pretty good little day, I think.
It's looking, weather-wise, it looks absolutely perfect, like 47 degrees, cloudy in the morning as this rain sort of blows through, and then it's going to clear up as the afternoon goes on. 5 to 10 mile an hour winds. I mean, October 15th, I don't know what else you could ask for. The woods are thinning out. We have some moisture. Tomorrow looks like it might just as well be the best day of the season so far. So, and hopefully that we get the best is yet to come. We're on the front end of it.
We kind of just covered a lot of different things, and you sprinkled in a lot of, especially when we first walked in, you named off a whole bunch of different cover types and the habitat and stuff. And so something that I've been curious about, and a listener reached out to me not too long ago, asking me some very, not insulting him by any means, some very basic, just rough grouse 101 hunting questions. And it made me realize, they say that the more knowledge we gain and the more experience you gain, the further away from, ground zero that you get. And so it got me thinking that, like, it has been a while since we've kind of spoken on rough grouse hunting, particularly kind of from the beginner standpoint.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking to where, like, all right, instead of just going down and being like, all right, what's a rough grouse? How do you, going down the typical stuff, it got me curious of us right now. Let's reflect back on when we were brand new starting out, what we thought was important, what we were being told and communicated by others, and then fast forward almost a full decade now for me, for you've been hunting them longer, but with dogs about a decade, about the same time, where the disconnects were from, like, when we first started to now. Like, what are those lessons that we've learned to where, like, okay, we probably put too much emphasis on this, not enough on that. Does anything kind of come to mind just on that initial question for you?
Yeah. I mean, definitely sort of education and thinking and strategy. I mean, it's a constant evolution, and it's like sort of there's always seemingly for me there's always something kind of like at the forefront, sort of piquing my curiosity. And it seems like every season I'm kind of like focusing on something else, and all that stuff kind of adds up. It's like another layer, right? As an education should be. Like every year you go out and you spend another X amount of days in the woods. Like, what are you learning? I think for a long time for me, and there's clearly two distinct eras for Nick, which is pre-bird dog, post-bird dog. So before, and I've talked about this many times on my show, like I hunted grouse a long time just as a walking through the woods with me solo or with friends or whatever. And back then, I mean, there's no Onyx. We're not, I'm a 16-year-old kid or whatever. Like I'm not using a plat book. Like the way the laws and stuff are in Minnesota, you can hunt unposted private land. I don't even know if I very rarely actually hunt private land. There's some industry land that maybe you hunt from time to time, but
And that's in Minnesota. You can hunt
you can
unposted
hunt
private.
unposted
Okay,
private
I don't
land
think I
in
knew
the
that.
northern portion of the state. It's been a few years since I've looked this up, but basically it's if you're in the, where you're hunting ruffed grouse primarily, if it's not posted, you can hunt it. But again, today I think it's less relevant just because most people are using OnX. You know where the public land
Right.
is, and that's where most of the good grouse cover is. But point of me saying that is like we would just kind of hunt any sort of. We'd be driving around these areas that I still hunt today, but you're driving around just looking for like a trail or something that doesn't have a no hunting sign or no trespassing. And by and large, we were probably 99.9% of the time on public land. But we would focus on trails because like that what an easy thing to do, right?
Right.
Like you got your hiking boots on and your remember Remington 870, and me and my buddy were walking down a trail.
So you got started with an 870 too?
My
Okay.
first shotgun was a youth model 870 Express. Yeah, I think I killed my first grouse ever with a like a lot of people, a little break action hammer gun, single shot. It was my cousin's gun. Um, then shortly thereafter, I got my Remington 870, and I used that for a long time until I think the next gun I got. Well, then I got a 12 gauge Browning BPS, and because I thought I needed a 12 gauge. I'm old, grown up now, like I need a
Yeah.
12 gauge. So I hunted
Fancy.
with
Yeah.
that for a long time, and then I got a Browning Satori. That was my first double gun, but that goes into the second era with bird dogs and double guns and all that kind of stuff. But we just like I learned a lot in those years hunting and trail walking and stuff, but it was I really I learned it's seemingly I learned everything by accident. Like I'd walk the same trails, not every day, but we'd walk the same trails over and over again, and you do that enough and eventually you flush a grouse off that same corner a number of times where you're like, "Oh." And I was so far from like even looking at a tree and saying, "Oh, that's an aspen tree," or "That's hazelbrush." I didn't identify anything. It was just that is grousey. Like it was just this pattern that sort of my brain and from time and repetition and experience established as that looking like grousey cover. Now I know, like basically I was looking at aspen, alders, hazelbrush, all the things that I talk about now, and I look at and I name and I identify. And but I didn't think anything more of it than, oh, if we flush a grouse on this corner every time we walk by here. And so I think that really gave me a foundation of like these deep rooted patterns of like what does grouse cover look like in these areas that I hunt. And I have that. And fast forwarding now to where I have taken an interest in species identification of trees and vegetation and food, and paying more attention to food and cover. What are they eating and looking on the ground? And I'll just, name it. I'll just say it in my head. Like I look at something, name it, identify it. And I kind of have fun with it. But I also think that kind of like you're creating these thoughts and these things in your head that you can sort of look back on, and then you take that to another area, and then okay, I can see the hazelbrush here, I can see the 10-year-old aspen cut here. I'm way more I use a lot more information and data now because we have it available to us. It wasn't available, and
Right.
it certainly or it wasn't as easily accessible Now, like that kind of stuff adds a whole other layer of complexity. It's there if you want it. You don't need it. You don't have to look into it or pay attention to it, but I use it a lot. And that's when it comes to like cover, like scouting and finding new places to hunt, that's where it all kind of starts for me. Other than just in the woods going for a walk, that's
Well, it's really interesting because that's, just identifying the species. You and I have talked about it a number of
yeah,
times over the years, and it's something that I really appreciate and I nerd out on. What I have come to find throughout the years, and this might be a byproduct of how much traveling I do
yeah,
to so many different places, because I go about it the same way. I have the same app, the picture this app, like,
yeah,
identifying it and just piecing the patterns together. But what I've found is that throughout the years, I will learn it, I download that information, and then I leave and go back home for a year essentially. And then when I come back up here, I can't recall the bulk of the names that I learned,
yeah.
but I still have the intuition of that's grouse cover. And so it's like it takes me a few days to get. I mean, I remember, the basics, the
Yeah.
hazel, the aspen, the
When you're
main
looking
thing.
at an
I know
aspen
I know
tree.
what I'm looking at, but I also, to your point, being able to put the name on it, it not only helps me, like, kind of catalog everything in my brain, but also when we are communicating to people and
Yep.
listeners and doing a podcast, it does help that to where it does kind of give some people where they can Google image search a plant species of whatever. But it is interesting that, like, you go back 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have been like, man, that's like one of the most important things I'm on right now. And I'm every year I'm getting more and more comfortable recognizing and realizing that, like, it goes in my brain and then it falls out of my brain and then I relearn it
Yeah.
come next year when it's time to cram for that test again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to where your point is you can kind of go into it as deep as you want
Yeah.
and overanalyze it if you want, but it's not completely necessary, especially if you have enough experience, like you said, that corner to where you can picture it enough to where when you're walking through the woods, you can recognize it. Like that's worth checking out. That's worth sending a dog in.
Yeah.
To where I think, in the past when you and I've been nerding out on it, I think a lot of people are like, I don't know any of these names.
Yep.
Like, do I need to know that for grouse hunting? And the answer is no, you don't. You just need more time in the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Let's go back again. That was Nick pre-dog.
Yeah.
I want to go to post-dog, and specifically, I want to hear a retelling almost of what you can recall from the first solo hunt that you did with Hartley, and the good and the bad that came out of it. Because I think back on my first hunt quite a bit here since this listener reached out,
Yeah.
and I'm just curious of, like, if you can remember the time that you were in the woods with Hartley for the first time, sitting here like, do I know anything?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. I actually pretty specifically remember the first hunt I ever did with Hartley, opening day. So I get Hartley, first bird dog, 2014. I probably remember a lot about this. 2014. So this is September, like mid-September, opening day. And back then, this has changed more so in the last few years, but back then, grouse opener was like Christmas. And not to say that it isn't now, but I do think about it differently, partly from a hunting perspective and a dog perspective, mainly like early season condition. Early season conditions are not prime time conditions.
Hot leaves are still up.
And
Yeah, all that stuff.
dogs and the way that I hunt now really highlight that. But at that time, you didn't care if it was going to be 70 degrees because you're not running a bird dog. You're going for a walk through the woods, and it's like a nice, beautiful September day. I don't care if I'm walking down a trail in sneakers and a t-shirt, and my buddies and I are out having fun grouse hunting. So anyways, it was opening day. We go up to my buddy's hunting camp in northern Minnesota, and I knew a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit about hunting with dogs. And I knew, like, that day my buddy had his first dog, who was maybe only a year ahead of Hartley, a Spinoni, actually.
Okay, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, that's my buddy Brian, who I've known since kindergarten, and we've been grouse hunting buddies for a long time. And so he had a Spinoni. So the year prior, we did some hunting with his dog and kind of getting the feel for hunting with dogs and stuff. But I was like, all right, Brian, I got this young puppy. I know that I need to. I don't know why, but I know that I need to hunt him by himself. I don't want to be hunting with the Spinoni all day long.
Smart.
Like we gotta separate, right?
Yeah.
So I send Brian to some nearby cover, and I go out on the back 40 behind the cabin, which is kind of like sort of the pet grouse, as we maybe the grouse don't get hunted a lot behind my buddy's shack, but I got a puppy.
Those are the camera grouse.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that you sneak pictures of from the deck.
Yes, exactly. Yep. So I run Hartley back, and man, he was so. I mean, he was born in June, so he's 3 months old or whatever.
Oh, he's a baby,
right? And we're walking the trail, and I actually remember we got into birds, and when I say we got into birds, basically Hartley's about 10 feet in front of me, and we're walking the mowed trails or whatever back there, and I hear chip, 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 and I look, and there's a brood of grouse kind of running away, and I remember my attention went totally to Hartley, like, okay, there's a grouse, I want to shoot it, but my dog's got to be locked up on point to shoot that grouse,
right?
Which, of course, he did not lock up on point. He very clearly showed interest in the birds and kind of like ran right up to them and flushed them. And I think that in that moment, I was probably like, I wasn't like super mad or anything, but it's just like, we missed an opportunity. But really, I should have just been like, I just got my 3-month-old puppy into ruffed grouse. Like, he smelled them, he saw them, he chased them. Heck, I probably could have shot one of the birds, and I would have. I don't remember like the flushes or if I even had a shot, but I would. If I was given that situation tomorrow, I would not have hesitated.
Right.
For all the reasons that you talked about with the pup tonight, like I would have shot that bird and put it on the ground and let Hartley get feathers in his mouth. And that was the very, very first hunt with Hartley. And it's not much else happened that day, but we got into birds. I mean, it's total success from a puppy perspective.
Yeah. Nothing but good from that.
Exactly.
Where could it have been better? Yeah. In a perfect world, a 3-month-old pup, who doesn't want to see their 3-month-old pup just slam a point on grouse? You shoot a grouse, like, I mean, great.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, that's how it plays out. But in a realistic world, and you hit on it like we just talked about it with Quinn, to where getting into this, you're your first bird dog. The advice that you get from everybody, good intention advice, advice that they, probably adhere to themselves, you go into it with a certain image painted in your head. Yes. And when that image isn't met, to your point, you're not mad, but it's lackluster maybe, or I don't even want to use the word disappointing, but that's kind of what it is. And it comes from other like influences on your mindset, or at least for me. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, when I first got into it, I truly green as anything.
Yep.
And I knew nothing. So I only knew what you see in magazines. I mean, heck, the podcasts and everything weren't even really a thing. There was nothing here. And just, I mean, it's strange to say that like within the past decade, a lot of what we do and what we learn from wasn't even a thing back then. I mean, I remember Onyx was still a little memory card chip that you put in your Garmin.
Who's going to do that? That's too much work.
Yeah, right? Like, oh man. But yeah, to your point, like that's kind of what I was intrigued by was, I was curious if you had that moment. And I think all of us kind of have a moment of that, to where we're kind of talking about like just unfair expectations on the dog.
Yep.
And so this, this really, I'm not just talking about the dog, but just in general about ruffed grouse hunting. All of the different expectations is like I went into when I came up here. Well, let me tell my first story with Rachel, and it was in Tennessee. So I went unicorn hunting in Middle Tennessee. So this tells you I knew nothing. And where I was hunting, it was insane. But so and the listeners, I've told the story quite a bit that I got Rachel started. So she wasn't a baby. She wasn't 5 months old. She was like right at a year. And it made a lot of sense for me to get a started dog, not to go down that rabbit hole, but I get her. And one of the big selling points of a started dog that the breeder made a lot of sense to me was you can get this dog and start hunting tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sold.
Yeah.
And so I get her, and I remember it was like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks after I got her, and we get back to Middle Tennessee, and I'm the guy that opens up the regulation book, and rough grouse hunting is open. Let's go.
Here we go.
All right,
Got a
here we
dog.
go. Why would they have a hunting season if there's no birds, right? Like, let's go. And so we go, and dude, I'm in blue jeans, cowboy boots, essentially, just square toe boots that you wear, whatever, and like a t-shirt. And I remember walking 12 plus miles in those cowboy boots that like my feet were screaming.
Destroyed.
And I still remember, like, we obviously didn't come across a grouse in Middle Tennessee just doing that. But I remember walking the exact opposite of what you want, because if you don't know what you're looking for and you're going to go for a walk in the woods, you're not going to go walk through the thick crap.
If you are taking the path of least resistance,
Right.
You're
going to go walk in a nice
big, beautiful oak trees.
Yeah, like, this is great. There's acorns everywhere. They should be here, right? And so yeah, I mean, I remember getting home, and my buddy Adam, lifelong friend, he was in town visiting. He went with me. He was a glutton for punishment, and he went full southern redneck on me and just went squirrel hunting halfway through the middle of it. But yeah, so like afterwards, we're both just nursing some really sore feet afterwards. That was my first hunt. But fast forward to the next season, because that was in February. Season in Tennessee goes till February because we have that many birds that we need to, be able to hunt them for that long. Fast forward, I get through the first training season. I kind of just make my way through that junk, and it's Wisconsin time. And to your point, when does season open? Mid-September. We're getting up here mid-September.
We gotta go.
We gotta go. And we come up here, and again, know nothing at all. And so that first hunt, I killed my first grouse on the first hunt, but it wasn't over a point. It was just walking through the woods, wild flush out of a tree. A roosted bird comes out. I shoot it. Rachel retrieves it, so she played a part in it, retrieves it, and then I go the entire rest of the week screwing up. Rachel should have left and found a new owner because she drilled like 3 grouse. So I remember vividly there was one grouse that she kind of goes and covers up on this little small hillside ridge that, in hindsight, I'm still kind of wondering why a grouse was there. It really wasn't the epitome of grouse cover, but that's where she locked up on point.
Yeah.
And I'd yet to have a grouse flush underfoot. And so when I walk up there and that big gray, I can still see it to this day, that gray-faced bird just gets out from underneath me, and I freeze. I completely just crap the bed on, and I swear, Rachel, that if looks could kill, she looked at me,
shoot daggers,
and I mean, I just froze and just I don't think I've had another layup shot. I could have hip shot that freaking bird. I could have thrown a rock and hit that bird. It was wide open for us, but to your point, like, going into it, we only go into it with the knowledge that we have shared by people before us, and you just have to go, and every season you just start tacking on those little lessons here, there, and you just start piling them on. And I think it's important for us to relive and recount these stories and let people know, like, when you go out for especially your first time, your first season, your second season, you're going to do some really dumb things.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're not going to make the most of your situations. Same thing with your dog. I could say that if you had gone and say that you saw those grouse with Hartley on the ground as a 3-4 month old puppy, I wouldn't put it over some people to just get overly excited and ground swat those birds. And there's a lot of potential things that can go wrong in that scenario that you could actually, it could be a detriment to that dog. And that's why I think it's important for us to recount some of this stuff. And it's also kind of fun to where it's like how far we've come.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, the biggest thing I was lacking, and I don't know if there's, unless you're like, if you grow up around bird dogs or you just have like more, I just had zero, like at this time, like I've gone on some hunts with my buddy Garrett who had his first dog, but it's a lot of first dog stuff, right? It's a lot of first dogs. And first time bird dog owners, I didn't grow up hunting with people that had the level of experience that I have now, you have now. Like you earn that over time. So, but the biggest thing that I was lacking was just like, what does the right stuff look like from my dog and a dog bird interaction? And so I just, and you read and you hear, don't only shoot pointed birds,
Right.
that whole thing, which we've got into before. But until you, I just don't know if there's any other way around it other than just running dogs
School of Hard Knocks.
watching them handle and do things right, which you get a sense for over time. Do things wrong, you pick that stuff over time. I didn't know what the right kind of dog work looked like from a dog that's 3 months old, 4 months old, 6 months old. I just had zero clue on what to be looking for, despite my efforts to read books and ask questions and talk to people. It was a learning curve that I was on, and everybody's got to go through that. I remember, like, this must have been maybe like like a week later. So like Hartley's 3 months and 1 week old, and like I'm at home, I'm back home. So this must be in like second weekend or something. I go up hunting in sort of my stomping grounds, and I tend to take Hartley out. I think we went for a walk, and then I remember I went over to my buddy Garrett's hunting shack, happens to be in that area, and I think it was at the end of the day, we're done for the day. We were sitting on the tailgate drinking a beer, just like right outside his hunting shack, and there's a little trail there, and I let Hartley out, just kind of showing Garrett my pup, I think, basically, and he's running around, and Hartley, I don't know, we must have decided to like walk a minute or two down this trail, right? So we're walking, guns are on the tailgate, unloaded. We both have beers in our hands, and we're walking down this trail. Hartley's right in front of us, right where you expect a 3-year-old pup to be, and he kind of turns to the side of the trail, stops, and I remember seeing his tail just go like straight up. And I remember looking at Garrett like, gosh, wouldn't that be cool if there was a grouse right there? And as soon as I said that, 3 grouse blew off the side of the trail, and we were just standing there with beers in our hands, just like laughing, and like we were like, God, where are our guns? Like, we don't have our guns.
Like you can run back to the truck and grab it, and
exactly.
The grouse will just wait on you. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like that. That was another like advancement for Hartley, and that was the first time I saw like intensity and like seeing. Like he was not in control of his tail, but he smelled grouse, and it's just like straight up. And like, I mean, I hope I never forget that. That's just burned into my head.
It should be.
Yeah.
I mean, it should be. It's like you said, he has no idea what a grouse is. He has no control over his body. It goes back to tonight. Like there's moments with these dogs to this day, it still captivates my imagination. And there was a point tonight where we're just walking Woody, and it was one of the times that like you could just see his nose catch something in the wind, and he veers off into the woods. And I'm like, how the hell do these puppies know that? Yeah. Like, yeah, it's genetics. Yeah, I get that. But like, it's just amazing to me how these dogs hit the ground and they just their instincts just take over. It never gets old for me to watch it, and it never does. And so those moments that you see, those light bulb moments, I hope that it's never lost. Like I hope that imagination and what captivates me, I hope I never lose that, because let's face it, puppies are puppies. Like they're cute, but they kind of suck. And there's a lot of good, but man, it's just like, well, you get to a year or two old like already, but that right there is why I will never get old. It will never get old watching a puppy have those light bulb moments and turn it on to where when you just see that tail just from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock and you see the birds flush out, even if you don't have the shotgun, like, I wonder if you had the shotgun, if those grouse flush out and you miss, if the moment's any different for you. Like, I wonder if it improved the moment for you because you didn't have the shotgun and you just got to witness and take it all in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I can assure you that I probably would have missed, because I was not anything of the wing shot that I am today, which is, the bar is not incredibly high, but I'm a lot better wing shot today than I was then. But yeah, I probably would have missed, and then I probably would have been mad about it, like, oh, I just missed an opportunity to reward my dog, all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
like just getting carried away with that stuff because you just don't have the spectrum. You don't understand the nuance of dog work and what is success and what isn't
Yeah.
success, and yeah,
Well, and that leads into the next direction here pretty nicely, as you said that you didn't really have the reference to know
yeah,
what's a 3 month old dog, 5 month old, 8 month old dog. And I don't want to go down the path of every dog is different. I want to stay on just the hunting style of people is different, right? Like
yeah,
what you want in a dog may be completely different than what I want in a dog, and different dogs are different. The lines are different, but just the mentality of how people hunt. You shared the woods with a lot of people. I've shared the woods with a lot of people. While we're all technically rough grouse hunting, we all hunt completely different. And when you find the people that hunt the way that you like to hunt,
yeah,
it's like, it, all right, did we just become best
yeah,
friends?
yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, again, with the beginner, very newbie green person in mind, how did you come about figuring out the style of hunt that you prefer? Because I know we've talked about this where you kind of bounced around like, what do I like? What do I dislike? How did you come about figuring out what does Nick Larson, what is his style of rough grouse hunting?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would only really be like the way to say it is just like kind of just through osmosis of just like doing it, and like I look at like how I hunt today, and it has a lot to do with I just like I mean my dogs are one thing, like they're kind of like it's a separate topic,
Right.
but I just like, or a separate bucket if you will. I like just going for hikes through the woods, and I am very like gamified, I like the idea of like this treasure hunt of like, okay, I'm looking at my Onyx maps, and I kind of like I look at this, I like forestry data, I love using that stuff to try to identify a place in the woods. And then like the perfect day is like I find a spot, I've got the afternoon, me and my dogs hop in the truck and we go, and we're just going to go for a walk through the woods, and I'm just going to walk through this place that I think is grouse cover, and I'm going to put my 2 feet in that grouse cover, and I'm going to walk around it, and I'm going to look and analyze at like everything I'm walking by. And really, while I'm doing that, I'm trying to identify like every little pocket of cover that I think is where a grouse might be hiding, right? Like that's what I'm doing while I'm listening to my dog's bell as he or she courses through the cover. And I have this sort of like map sort of planned in my head. I'm going to follow this edge, right? This swamp edge or the edge of this cover, and hopefully my dogs are going to be weaving back and forth through that stuff, and we're gonna find birds. But I love to explore. I love to explore, and I love to hike. And when I do that, I'm pretty quiet. I have more recently I'm making an effort to slow down a little bit and not just charge along that path that I've pre-charted in my e-scouting. I'm trying to slow down, let my dogs hunt it more, because I've learned this, you can push your dogs through so much good cover. Like if I'm out there with one dog and I go to a big spot, big piece of public land, my eyes are always bigger than my stomach when it comes to like looking at maps and scouting and stuff. It's like, oh yeah, I can do this whole loop. It's like you get in there and there's birds mixed throughout the whole thing, and we're looking for hot spots and stuff. But I'm trying to slow down, let my dogs hunt it, let them cover it. And I think that is, I guess for me, like everybody probably has their own pace, but I think I have gone too fast in the past. I think you have quite a bit to gain by slowing down. And Kyle Warren talks about this a lot. I mean,
I was just, while you're talking about this,
yeah,
I go, you share the woods with so many people.
hmm,
There's key moments that like I can pluck from, I've had those with you. I
yep,
mean, years ago when we first started hunting, like I've had those moments to where I'm like, I'm stealing that. Thank you.
yeah,
And then Kyle, same thing. But Kyle was the one that opened my eyes. And I think you and I spoke about that at length after I got to go hunt with
yep,
him, of how methodical he is and how he covers the ground and how he uses it, to where you just said a lot of transitions, a lot of, I'm going to work this edge, I'm going to work this edge. And of course, he's going to work the edge. But also, one thing that he did was like, stop to look at the map. Did the dog cover the middle of it? He didn't have to go
Yeah.
cover every grid within that cut, but he expected either him and or the dog to go do it. And that was what that really opened my eyes to where like I'm moving too fast,
Yeah.
because you do that 3 or 4 times to where he looks down, it's like that one spot on the map, we didn't hit that. And I'm like, that one spot. Like 3 or 4 times we go over and that one spot had the grouse in it. And he made a very good point. He's like, look, all this map scouting, all of this time on the ground and boots on the ground, and what's it for if not to recognize grouse cover? You are in here working this grouse cover for a reason.
Yep.
There should be a grouse in it. That's not to say that there is a grouse in
Right.
it, but the odds of a grouse being in there are high because you've filtered it down and and synthesized the information all the way down to like, this is prime habitat. There should be something here.
Yep.
And it made a lot of sense to me. And so it's funny you say that, to where it's just like, it's funny how like I can draw from hunts with you, hunts with Kyle, hunts with fill in the blank, Bill, whoever, of like, yeah, I can remember very vivid like pieces of the puzzle that I pulled from other people. And that goes into what you're saying, the osmosis of like, you just kind of go hunt and you start figuring out, piecing together your style.
Yep.
But I think there are common elements throughout this, to where it's like, I think there are some people that move too slow in the woods, but also they don't need to be moving as fast as like what you and I were 2 or 3 years ago, to where like, hey man, let's cover some ground and let's get to the next spot. It's almost like we were just passing by great opportunity to.
And I'm sure we did.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's the map scouting like for you? Like, talk to me about your process. You don't have to go into too many details if you have some secrets, but like, somebody's listening to this. Okay, Onyx. I got Onyx on my phone. Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's actually, I got this question from somebody, I think on Instagram today. They were kind of asking what they should be looking for, and they primarily hunt in Pennsylvania. And I was kind of, what I could tell them in a quick Instagram exchange was, I certainly utilize whatever forestry data that I have available, and it doesn't need to be really complex. Like one of the best examples I can give is the Wisconsin. We're in Wisconsin. We're hunting Wisconsin. Wisconsin game bird layer is. Now I haven't I hunt primarily Minnesota, Wisconsin. I don't know what else is out there in all these other states. I haven't done a deep dive, but that is fantastic. Like, they have a phenomenal inventory on state and county lands. I don't think it includes federal, because federal's separate, but they have a phenomenal inventory of their forest, and part of that inventory includes aspen stands 5 to, I think theirs might be 5 to 20. I'd have to double check that, but you turn that layer on and you're going to see aspen cuts. And aspen cuts are something that we talk about, right? I had somebody ask me recently, when you say cut, what do you mean? Where they've come in and they've cut a stand of trees and now it's regenerating aspen. Just simply identifying that, every one of those on a map to me is like an objective. It's a place to go for a hike where there's probably grouse, because grouse utilize young aspen stands, right? 5 to 20 years old, whatever. They use all kinds of different covers. So what I eventually want to get to is like, you can get tunnel vision by just looking at these aspen cuts. And I have had that tunnel vision, and I've kind of taken a step back from that more recently and exploring more outside of that. But that alone, if you're just starting out, like look that up, find that aspen cut and go. If they've got that great data where it's an actual shape file of the cut, you can see it on the satellite imagery, but when it's outlined in a tool like OnX, that's even higher value data. Go walk the edge of that. Just walk around it. The whole edge of that is going to be an aspen stand abutted adjacent next to something else. It might be a swamp. It might be an opening. It might be a mature pine stand. Whatever it is, I think that is probably one of, and it may be very obvious to people, but I think that's probably, if you want to flush grouse and you want to learn about grouse, I think walking the edge of cuts or higher stem density, young, early successional forest, walking the edge of that, you're pulling Grouse like it because it increases biodiversity. You've got multiple species there. In those edges of those cuts and those seams, you typically are going to get more sunlight, and you're going to get more of the shrubs and the fruit bearing shrubs, whether it's hazelbrush or thorn apple, whatever it is in your region, your area. You're going to get more of that along those seams and those openings. So I think by walking the edge of that, it's kind of like going back to Nick's trail days where I'm learning by accident just because I'm walking a trail. Trail is another kind of edge, and there are certain places in trails that bring grouse in because they probably have food, and they probably have cover, and they probably have the two of those in close proximity to each other, which is increasing the odds you're going to find a grouse there. So walking the edges of those things, I feel like you will flush birds, and you will learn about the specific kinds, the nuances of what makes a really good edge or a really good transition between covers. And so I do that a lot. I will look at whatever forestry data I can get my hands on, and I don't want to like make it out where it's like I'm staying up for hours late at night looking at maps, right? It's just like when I'm sitting there, like I'm going hunting the next day, I'm looking at my maps and I'm reviewing some of the spots that I've hunted before, and I always have that sort of urge to find a new place,
right?
That the treasure hunt, if you will. I'm into that. So I'm always kind of looking like, all right, I hunted here. What's nearby? Where does this swamp edge go? And I'll just kind of get lost looking at my maps on Onyx and looking at that stuff and trying to identify a new spot to check out. That would be the other thing I would say is and this is again nothing new here, but if you got a spot that you like, hunt it, but then find another spot. And then find another, the next day, find another spot. However your days shakes out. If you're taking a trip that you take every year, go hit a spot that you hunted last year and it was good, and then make the next one a different spot. You always got to be sort of investing in your inventory of covers, if you will, or that's what I like to do because I like to see new places, explore new places, and again, you'll learn more by hunting more places. That's like been the biggest takeaway that I've had with my dogs and how I have learned to hunt over the last 10 years is just consistently trying new places and taking what I've learned, applying that to another spot, and just branching out and hunting as much different stuff as I can. And there's themes and patterns that, you kind of like, you see those in all these different places, but by hunting more and more spots, you're gonna learn more. It's pretty obvious in that way. But
what are you looking at on a map? If you're looking at the map, if you're in the moment, we're looking for that new study. There's got to be more than just the grouse area or that layer on the map, to where it's just like, okay, the surrounding stuff has to matter at some point. Like, what are you actually like? Okay, this spot on the map is worth me going to today.
So let's circle back to that game bird layer because it's really cool in this way. It identifies two things, and I think I talked about this recently, maybe on an episode. It's kind of funny how it's labeled. They label the young aspen stands grouse area,
right?
And then those are pink outlines on the map. If you've hunted Wisconsin, you might know this. But then there are purple outlines, which are basically alders. They're like lowland brush. I don't know exactly what they call it, but they call that a woodcock area because they tend to be wetter.
Yeah.
So it's good woodcock. But I think it's kind of funny that it's one of them is grouse area and one of them because I could almost make a case that in some
flip it.
Yeah. In some scenarios, that stuff that's labeled woodcock area is better grouse cover.
I just wish they would call it literally aspen,
lowland brush,
and
or young aspen.
Yeah, like why grouse and why woodcock?
They should do that. We could start a petition.
But. There you go. We're gonna change the world one episode at a time.
But to get to your point, if it's just a young aspen stand and that's all I'm seeing on the map, that is knock it down a peg on my grading scale, right? What I want to see, I want to look for areas that have both the young aspen stands with the lowland brush or the grouse area and the woodcock area. If I see a bunch of those kind of checkerboarded around, I know that is bird country because now I've got I've got low areas with maybe some seasonal water. I've got stem density in the young aspen cover. There's going to be transitions and seams, and then it's just like how diverse can it get? Do we have the 10-year-old aspen cut? We have the lowland alder swamp. Do we have a mature pine stand over here? If I got all three of those things coming together, you can bet I'm going to be trying to walk whatever seam that kind of intersects all three of those. So there's an objective on a map, and then where is the most diversity in that area that I can feasibly go out and hunt my dog through, right? Whether is it a mile, 2 miles, whatever it is. Try to put yourself in the places where you have the most diversity. And the quality of the information in the mapping apps now is such that you can do that a lot. But we would be remiss if we didn't say, if you just look at that stuff, there's a lot of other grouse cover out there that isn't highlighted or shaded with a pretty pink line or a purple outline. There's grouse cover out there that is sort of flying under the radar, and that's okay. Like, whoever finds that, good for you.
And
right?
it's funny, those are my favorite types
Yes.
of grouse cover,
Yeah.
honestly. You're going to flush less birds, but the birds that you do flush, you're, in my opinion, you're probably going to have a better shot opportunity at them.
They maybe haven't seen as many people.
They haven't seen
certain
as many
areas.
people.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you're looking at the map and you're trying to make these decisions and you're seeing this checkerboard pattern and you're getting excited. I want to go. How much do the current conditions, weather conditions, dryness, heat, temperature, whatever, change it? And this is probably more of an early season hunt, but I also know you and I've kind of had some late season nerd out discussions on, like, well, what's the grouse eating now? And then, that's when they're up in the top of eating the aspen buds and stuff like that. So, like, how much are you giving the current conditions relative to those covers? Because it can't just be like, pick a thing on the map based on what a cut was 10 years ago. Like, there's got to be more details that we can glean off of, to where it's just like, all right, I'm not going to go hunt the tag alders in December, but in September I'm sure as hell going in the tag alders, or at least adjacent to them. I don't want to be in the tag alders.
Yeah.
That sucks, but but when it's hot and they need water and it's been dry, you go to the swamps, right? It makes sense. So like, tell me about your thought process on, like, how you're actually balancing all of that out to where you're not bouncing around a million different places.
Yep. I think there are certain things that do go on during the season where you're paying attention to that. This season is a good example where up until 2 days ago, like, it hadn't rained for like a month or something. It was just ridiculous. Like I was at Pinehurst Grouse Camp last week. The most common topic of conversation was how dry the woods were. It was just crazy. So much so that, like, we didn't flush a woodcock today. Like, and we were in cover that, I mean, there's no reason we couldn't have flushed a woodcock. We didn't see any today. It was kind of a small sample size, but it was so dry that I was trying to hunt places with alders and drainage, and most of that stuff was bone dry. I mean, you were lucky if you got a wet boot like the first month of the season
Right.
to this point. I mean, I was hunting with Kevin Erdbig last week, and we tried to cross a beaver swamp that we were unsuccessful, and he was the test dummy. He went across. He got a wet boot. He got lucky. His boots
He
got
got
wet
the lucky
that day.
boot.
Yeah, but it's like we had to try to go somewhere that we shouldn't have to actually get wet boots. But I was, in some of my hunts up to this point, I really felt like I was pretty much flushing the grouse on some of those alder edges, and you could see it. Like, if you were up on higher ground a little bit, and the elevation is not extremes here. This is I pretty much hunt flatland grouse country, relatively speaking. This is not mountainous country, but like, you're up high in the aspen, it's crunchy and bone dry, and you go down to the alders, and like, there's no water down there, but the grass is just a little bit greener. You could just tell, like, the places that the moisture hung on the longest, that's where we were flushing grouse. I think in a normal season, when there's a decent amount of water in the woods and you're not dealing with that extreme drought, I try to prioritize diversity from start of the season to the end of the season. There's like subtle things I will do in the early season versus what I do in the late season. But if you're trying to keep it simple and you're just starting out, I would prioritize habitat diversity. Going back to what I talked about, like we've got the aspen cut, we've got the lowland brush, we've got the conifer stand. If you just focus on areas where those three things intersect, or more, you're going to be pretty close to the right spot, because these birds, they don't pick up and migrate. They don't fly from one side of the county to the other. They move around within the cover, absolutely. And you want to be paying attention, and you could get into checking crops and looking at what are they eating. Like there's a couple transitions that I really pay attention to in my area, which is start of the season. They should still be kind of eating insects and stuff that they're eating during the summer. There's a point where once that frost really does kick in and starts to knock down some of the fruit and stuff, our birds will really transition onto hazelbrush, and and it's right about this time of year from here on out. Like it'll be a while this year because again, we haven't had that frost, but you'll start finding crops that are just absolutely solid,
Packed
full
with
of
them.
hazel catkins. And hazelbrush is something we've talked about a lot before. Not hard to find in Minnesota and Wisconsin. It is not ubiquitous across all of the ruffed grouse range, but you want to know how to identify that if you're hunting around this area, because that's kind of been the key for me to find these areas outside of the textbook aspen stand, the 10-year-old aspen stand. I will happily hunt a 50-year-old aspen stand that has basically a uniform understory of hazelbrush. Yeah. That's like,
and it's funny you say that, because thinking back when I first started, and I'm asking all the questions that everybody's asking, where do I find, where do I go, blah blah blah. The only thing I was told was find aspen cuts, 10 to 15 years old, and go walk it. Like that was pretty much it. I don't even recall somebody telling me to walk like transitions.
Yeah.
Like it was just find, the age meant everything. And what I've come to find, and something that I've gotten feedback from some buddies and some people I've helped out, is look for that second understory. Don't be afraid to hunt a 20 or 30-year-old cut if there's a healthy understory in there. Usually the hazel catkins, but you can even find like a nice little understory with scrub oaks and stuff underneath it.
Yep.
And if you look for that understory and you find me, and we've talked about this before, I don't know where you stand on this, but conifers are a big thing, to where like
huge.
I really value the kitchen and the pantry. I really value the security and everything. But I find that birds aren't going to go far from their bed, right? Like if there's no roosting cover, more like if I look at a naked aspen stand and there's nothing in it but aspen, and this goes back to the biodiversity, of course, but like especially if I don't see a nice seed oak somewhere in there, or a conifer, especially, like I really hone in on those conifers. So I tell everybody, like, look, like it's not enough to just go off of the year age cut. If it was that, it would be a lot easier. But look for that second understory. And I've shown people, and it's funny how like you can send people pictures, you can describe it, but until you're like standing there and you can put your hand on their shoulder, that is what I'm looking for. Then it's kind of like, it's a game changer, at least the people that I've helped with. So it's funny you bring up the understory in an older cut, because so many people will just be like, it's too old. I'm not going in there.
Yeah. Yeah. You could overlook a lot of stuff if you had that sort of, it's gotta be this tall. And if it gets beyond this point, it's too much. Like
the thickness of the stem is, I was told, like, if it's bigger than a beer can, you're in the wrong place. What was it that I was told so often starting out? If you can throw your hat up in the air and it come back down to the ground, you're in the wrong cover.
Right.
And I'm like, that's my favorite cover. Yeah. Like I will gladly
get better shots in there.
That's my point. Like we can kind of veer off to that direction now, to where it's not all about the flush count. It's the quality of flushes. Yes. I can go into these really young aspen stands and you can hear and maybe even see, like at a distance, these grouses just bombing over the treetops, and you can flush 25, 30 birds. but how many opportunities did you actually have on them?
Yep.
And then how much damage did it do to your dog going through that crap? Right?
Yep.
Not just you. I mean, that sucks for all of us,
Yeah.
but it does damage to your dogs too. So not only on that walk, but that can take away from your overall hunt for the rest of the trip if you're traveling.
Yes.
And to your point, like, I will gladly give up 25 out of those 30 flushes if those 5 flush, birds are still there and I actually have a shot and a play at them.
Yep.
And it's like it almost evens up the playing grounds, if you will. But if you want to go fly birds, yeah, go in that really thick young stuff. They're in there.
Yes.
And you do scrape out some shots here and there throughout it. So I don't want to make it sound like it's impossible by any means.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is sort of it's a shift that I've made. Like, it was like, okay, first we gotta go into the 10-year-old Aspen and we gotta see where grouse live. We just go in
Yeah.
there and figure it out. And okay, yeah, it's thick and I can barely move and there's birds in here. Great. Now I am kind of like self-selecting, sort of curating my hunts, if you will, to where one of the reasons I like to be on those edges is because I like to be in as open of cover as I can be with being surrounded by thick grouse cover,
Yeah.
right? So that's why I put myself on those edges and those seams, because usually what is there in those seams between? There's a deer trail. There's a game trail. There's somewhere that I'm walking through. I'm taking the path of least resistance within the high stem density cover that me and my dogs are hunting. But I'm trying to be in those open areas. And again, I think at the highest level of my filter, I'm always, and this is to your point of the conifers, I'm always trying to prioritize for where's the most diversity. I was hunting 2 Saturdays ago. I got a video of this. I didn't post it, but I might, because I was walking through a beautiful stand of like, from a forester's perspective, like, this aspen is like regenerating lovely. It's amazing. But it was the most boring 10-year-old aspen stand. There wasn't a hazelbrush understory. I could basically see the ground, and the aspen had dropped its leaves, so it thinned out. And it was a warm day, and the sun was beating down in there, and it was just like, this is not where it's at. It's just too dry and it's too plain. So I steer out to the edge. I don't even remember how I was on some other edge, and then I'm in there. I beeline it for the edge of that cover, which happened to be up next to a stand of maples, which I do not like. You're
not a maple spinner guy.
I do not like to be near maples. I don't spend a lot of time hunting it. I'm probably overlooking it in some ways. But what I found on the edge was a nice little seam. There were some mature maple trees. There were some mature aspen trees, I think. And there was these little clumps of alders. A little clump of alder here, which on that particular day, this is kind of like conditions that you were talking about. It was green and it was cooler, and it just felt just a hint of, it was damp. It was damp in an otherwise bone dry area that I'm hunting. And I was walking up to this little pocket of like a little clump of alders. Alders still had their leaves, so there's some shade in there and stuff. And I was literally saying to myself, I'm like, this is a pocket where the grouse is going to be right under my foot. And now, granted, I say that to myself 500 times every day. One time a grouse flushes and I feel validated, but that bird was there. That's the kind of place that I'm trying to put myself in. And so I just, if you do want to simplify it, I think, locate those aspen stands if you got them, if you have that information. But then once you're there, then prioritize like the transitions, the seams. I mean, how many times can we say it? Yeah. I try to prioritize diversity of cover and where I'm actually walking. And your dogs are out there doing their thing. They're gonna find, like, a grouse doesn't need this seam or edge that you can see on satellite imagery to make that a grouse spot. There can be a little clump of cover right over there that I would just walk by, except, my dog went on the downwind side of it and pointed a grouse in there. Like, they're going to find that stuff too. That's how you learn. But
I find it interesting and funny that you don't like maples.
Yeah.
It's not that I have an affinity for maples by any means, but I find it interesting that like it was 3 or 4 years ago I came up here and it was another super dry year, like very dry. And the only birds I found that entire week was adjacent to maple. And
Yeah.
every crop I opened up was full of maple spinners. It may have been because I was only hunting maple
Right.
because you pick up the pattern. But, dry year now, you just, that one bird was maple. But that's, this is how you start picking up the patterns, right? Like, I'm not saying that there's, you know, correlation doesn't equal causation,
Yeah.
But file it away. And it's like, another dry year. If we start finding birds near maple, maybe in dry years, go find the maples.
Yeah.
Who knows,
Yeah.
right? Like just write it down
Yep.
and pull it back and reference it later. I want to move on from the habitat and figuring out where the birds are to interacting with the birds, right? Like, how do we go from dogs on point? What's changed? What did you think it was when you first started? And how are we flushing now? I mean, even down to the shotgun and ammo, like what we found the birds. What are we doing now?
Yeah. Yeah, reading the dog is probably the other like sort of overall bucket that I would filter through, and it's like what I thought I should be looking for was that still image in a magazine of dog staunchly on point and bird 10 feet off its nose. There's the grouse. The dog stops and stands there, and I circle around and walk in and gently nudge the bird out of the grass. It flies up, right? Like that image, but that is an image on a wall. There's one behind me over there, right?
I was just about to say the RGS print that
Yes.
we're all familiar with.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And that does happen, but there's like it's a moving masterpiece. The dog, the bird, the cover, like being able to read the dog and follow that dog's through relocations as the bird runs through cover and moves ahead of the dog, like establishing some of those things. And part of it is like early on, like I'm only looking for that one mental picture where a dog is perfectly still and I walk in and flush the bird. But to even believe that your dog could be like, is he like after the dog relocates 3 or 4 times, like is a grouse really
Right.
running ahead of this dog, and we're eventually gonna stick with it and get this thing pointed? I mean, now just by brute force, like I've seen it happen enough times where I know. But it's still always a constant like, nah, trust the dog, keep going.
Trust the hunter with the longest nose.
Letting it play out, being more of an observer than a know-it-all that I'm gonna walk in and flush this bird right in front of the dog's nose. Like it's almost just like taking a back seat a little bit, sort of letting it play out, and then constantly trying to put yourself in a position.
And we've learned that because we've injected ourselves into that. We've been in the woods with the guy that, like, the dog will go on point, and then as you're moving up, he starts moving, and what do? They woe the dog.
Yeah.
And then there's no bird, and he's just like, oh, good for nothing, non-productive point.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe you also told the dog to stay there while that bird put, a different county between us.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas something like you said, it's hard to watch a pointing dog break a point and relocate a bird naturally on its own. But when your bird dog starts piecing that puzzle together, it's uphill from there,
Yeah.
or downhill.
Downhill,
from there.
yeah.
Like it's funny how fast it catches on, and all of a sudden you bird, and it's just, to your point, you're trusting your dog a little bit more, which is why we get them in the first place. But whenever they flash the first point, some people just forget that they have that nose on them.
Yeah.
And they're just like, now I have to control the hunt so that I get a shot opportunity. And it's like, well, you did it too soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to basically remove myself from that process, other than only trying to be like almost like a blocker of sorts. Like, I'm trying to not interfere with the dog at all. I really don't want to say anything to my dog. My dogs freely relocate and do whatever they're going to do on their own. we have developed that trust over time, that I know that my dogs are trying to point the bird. I've seen them do it enough times where I know that they are trying to point the birds. Inevitably, they will bump a bird on a relocate at some point. Like, it's going to
We
happen.
saw it tonight.
Yeah, we saw it tonight. It's going to happen. But I accept and enjoy, like, just not even getting involved in that process. I don't want to control my dog. I don't want to do any of that stuff. It's There are times where you're fighting the urge, or it's like maybe things get a little hectic and maybe you need to settle the dog down at some point, but very rarely, or at least as little as I possibly can, I'm trying not to do that, and I'm trying to just let that dog get that bird pointed, because I again, I got a 4-year-old dog and a 10-year-old dog. I've seen them both do it enough times where I know that's what they're trying to do.
They earn the trust, and
Exactly.
and they can't earn the trust unless you give them the opportunities to do
Correct.
it. And my dogs know, whoa, I have a remote stop, I'll use it, but I have a rule where I don't do it while birds on their ground. And if they're relocating and the bird doesn't fly, I'm not saying anything.
Yeah.
As soon as you hear that flush or you see that flush, okay, I'll
Whoa.
whoa them,
Yeah.
stop to flush, whatever. And the dogs, in theoretically, they learn to anticipate that, like, oh, bump bird, I'm just gonna stop, or you recall, whatever, fill in the blank. But yeah, to your point, like, let it play out. So many people are quick to brag and talk about how smart their dogs are, but then when it's time for a dog to be smart, they don't even give them the opportunity or chance to. And then that's how they end up 8-10 years later. You end up with a dog that, like, they won't even relocate. Like, you've been in the woods with some dogs, I'm sure, that, like, you can go kick them over. Like, they're not going to relocate on a running bird because it's just been corrected so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you learn to read the dog, like, you'll most people that have dogs, I think you pick up on, like, intensity of point, and you kind of read those subtle things about your dog. But, like, if your dog is standing there intense, like, they smell something, and the bird might be right there, or the bird maybe moved off. And if you give them that chance, like, you kind of walk in, make that flushing attempt. Eventually, like, if the bird's truly not there, like my dog, and every scenario is really quite different, but, like, they kind of start to soften up and they start to look around. They kind of, like, look at you. Then it's like, then I know, like, okay, bird's not here. And I don't really have a release command. My dogs will just kind of eventually move on. Then they sort of move up in the direction they think. And when that happens, I'm moving in to flush, right? If my dog starts to move on a relocate, I want to stop. And Jerry Coulter always said this. He's like, when the dog's moving, ideally you want to be stopped, standing, watching, observing. When the dog is stopped, that's your time to move. And you really see it when you have something established, you have a contact established. Dog is stopped, so I'm moving, making the flush attempt. This was something I fought for a long time, wanting to, like, just get pulled into the dog, right?
Yeah.
Right up to the dog, 10 feet away from the dog, and do that meager little flushing attempt. And the bird is 25 yards ahead and flushes out, and you had no shot. So I'm trying to make a bigger flushing attempt, keep moving in front of the dog. And you'll be amazed. I mean, you'll be amazed, like, how far those grouse will run, or how far ahead of the dog they will be after the dog has pointed 2, 3, 4, 5 times. It's just crazy how far those birds will move. And now I just enjoy that. Like, it took me a while to learn that and to see that and to read that. Now I just kind of enjoy that roller coaster ride of, like,
it adds a little extra flair to the whole, like, kind of the whole situation.
Yeah.
What about, so you try and circle, you try and get out in front, you don't let the pointing dog be a tractor beam, which I think it's safe to say anybody that gets a pointing dog, like, at some point has to kind of overcome that.
Yeah.
So you go flush. Talk to me about the progression of your shotgun, your ammo. I know that's changed throughout the years. That's changed since I've known you. So, like, what are you using now, and why? We don't have to go through, like, from your 870 all the way to your current shotgun now, but, like, what are you carrying and why now?
Yeah. Well, going to side by side shotguns, that was a big change for me. And it was really just out of curiosity, like most things in my life. It was like, I've told this many times. Like I always thought side by sides were an Elmer Fudd gun, kind of goofy. Like I just never had any inclination. My dad didn't have them. Like, and then no reason to like side by sides other than I kind of like got into this grouse hunting and bird dogs and the history, and I got into all that stuff. A couple of my friends started hunting with side by sides, and I just sort of went off the deep end. So I got my first one, and there was a little bit of a learning curve. This is before gun fitting, Del Whitman, custom guns, all that kind of stuff. So I had some side by sides that didn't fit me very well. I know that in hindsight. So it was like this big sort of struggle to like shoot a side by side. And I've talked to many people now that they'll say like, "Oh, I shot a side by side one time. I can't shoot those things," and I think it's just they shot a poorly fit side by side. And there are some differences in a side by side and an over under that you have to kind of account for with gun fit or one of those things. So, but I think if you can shoot an over under, you can shoot any shot. You can shoot a side by side too.
Right.
I really think you can, but it takes some practice. So I shoot side by sides now, and to me now it's a bird gun. Side by sides are bird guns. I love two shots is good for me. I love break action guns. I mean, there's many reasons I hunt for a side by side, but what I think I hunt with side by sides. I think one of the cool things is I really think they are like they're one of the best performing guns. Like I'm not giving up anything to hunt with a side by side other than a third or fourth shell or whatever, which just is not that important to me.
Yeah.
But from a feel and handling and shooting ability, like they're on par with anything else. So I just like them. I like vintage ones. I obviously like the modern Italian ones that I build for myself and for customers. We sell them at Up and Gun Company from RFM, but I shoot those, and I always was a real big fan of the 20 gauge. To me, that was just kind of like a grouse gauge. My first gun was a 20 gauge. I've had many of them over the years. I got curious about the 28 gauge and kind of went down that rabbit hole, and I pretty much shoot for the last handful of years. I pretty much have only shot 28 gauges, and my take on that is it's a specialty tool. But a 3/4 ounce load of 8 or 8.5 shot pretty much does everything I need to do in the grouse woods. So I just choose to carry a lightweight, well-fitting 28 gauge side by side, and I enjoy carrying it. I enjoy shooting it, and I feel I get all the performance out of it that I need, basically.
I find it funny how, like, obviously you and I have a shared passion for ruffed grouse hunting, but where that passion leads us, it's interesting to me to where, like, I've been with you in enough camps and around enough people to where, like, you light up with the mention and the showing of a shotgun the way I light up with a well-trained bird dog.
Yeah.
Like, it's just funny how priorities shift, but like you truly, like, anybody pulls out a vintage shotgun, you're there. Like, hand it to me, let me shoot it now.
Let's take a look at that thing.
Yeah. Tell me about this. And it's funny. I'm the same way about it. Like, somebody has a nice showing dog, I'm like, tell me about it. Like, what did you do? How did we get there?
Yeah.
But it's just funny. And the ammo, though. This is something, you talk about you trying out the 28 gauge, you drank the Kool-Aid, you sent some of the Kool-Aid home with me not too long ago, and here I am with the 28 gauge, and I'm loving every minute of it. And I'm not the biggest gear guy. I've been very open about this on the podcast where I appreciate the functionality of it and its practicality and usefulness of it. And I can say that, like, I don't think that I've really brought something into my hunting setup that's made such a drastic impact as that 28 gauge has, like, right out of the gate. I mean, the gun is fitted to me now and all that, but it's very noticeable to me on, if anything else, and I think there's a lot to it, of just the confidence of shooting it. It feels good. I do enjoy the look of it. There is something kind of cool about the, it's a 28 gauge instead of a 20 gauge.
Yeah.
But the thing that appealed to me the most, it wasn't the fact that, like, no offense, that you really appreciated, but you spoke to my the practicality of it
Yep.
and the pellets and the ammo and all that stuff. Touch on that because I think a lot of people this goes beyond a lighter weight shotgun.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people might be under the impression that that's ultimately what it is for a lot of people.
I can definitely get sidetracked by my curiosity, right? This is a common theme. I lean into it as much as possible because I love learning new things, and
And it's fun to see where the path takes you.
it is.
I'm the same way.
It
Yeah.
really is, and that's why you and I can sit and have these
Talk
conversations
about whatever
all day
yeah.
long, right? So, but I do need to really buy into something. Like I'm a very logical person, so I got to have it's got to be rooted in something, right? Like eventually I'm going to realize, oh, okay, this is all smoke and mirrors, right? And there are a lot of smoke and mirrors with the 28 gauge. I don't believe people talk about the magic of the 28 gauge, and it's like,
You talking about the patterning
yeah,
stuff?
the patterning and
Yeah.
the square load, and like I went down that path. Like I wanted to like, what is this all about? Like, does a square load, like, I better be shooting a square load if it's like,
Define square load for those that
so
are
square
unfamiliar with
load
this.
is the height of your shot the pellets in your shot shell are a certain amount tall as they are the width of your gauge. So a square load is having shot pellets that are the shot column, as they would call it, that's the term, is as tall as it is wide. And there's a certain payload, and we'll say we're talking about lead shot here, because if you start talking about different shot types, it changes because of the density and everything. But as these gauges were developed over the years, and there's this, it's all rooted in like how many balls of lead fit into like a larger ball. I'm forgetting the exact numbers here. That is the equivalent of the gauge size. It's like how many. I think it might be 28 balls of this size fit into a certain, like a pound of lead or something.
It's a pound of lead. I literally just heard this on
Okay.
the Meat Eaters, Long Hunters audio book or whatever they were talking about,
Yeah.
how the gauge came up. So for 1 pound of lead, if you break that down to get 28 even balls of that lead, that's
The
your
size
28
of those
gauge.
balls is the
and so the size of
the
a 20
gauge.
gauge,
Correct.
you're only getting 20 of them. Yeah.
So it's 1 pound. It's 1 pound of lead. So, anyways, that all came about because there's a standard payload for each gauge. So in the 28 gauge, it's 3/4 ounce. 20 gauge, it's 7/8 ounce. 1 ounce, and you hear it a lot with the 16, and you hear it a lot with the 28, which I think is because as those are great. They're great gauges. They can do a lot, but we try to justify like why the 16 gauge. It's just like there's the shooting and hunting world is just rightful to, and probably every little niche in the world.
Yeah.
Like you have sort of
Passionate people.
correct that are
Interested,
trying
passionate
to justify
people,
why
yeah.
their tool is the best, right?
Yeah.
And I probably do it on my show, but I'm at a point where, like, the 28 gauge there is nothing magical about it except for the kind of the whole package of the 28 when it's built on the right frame. I won't say a 28 gauge frame, but the right frame, and you have a lightweight gun it feels small and it feels sleek and it feels nimble, yet a 3/4 ounce payload of, I like number 8.5 shot, number 8 shot, heavily influenced by my good friend Dale Whitman. You did an episode with him and you guys went into this stuff, and it was a really good episode. People should listen to that. That is when you take all of that and you put it in that small gun that kind of almost like feels like a toy. Like it almost feels like
Right.
it's not a 12 gauge, right? Like it's so much, like this can't be as effective or as powerful as a 12 gauge. It's just a little 28 gauge. But then you throw that 3/4 ounce payload of 8.5 shot, which is like pellet count 373 or something, going off memory. I wish I had the chart here, but at ranges that you're typically shooting ruffed grouse, I bet I kill a lot of birds like under 20 yards
Yeah.
because I'm hunting with pointing dogs and I'm selecting for shots where I want to be right on top of that bird, really. Like I want my dog to be pointed and I want to put myself in a position to flush that bird and ideally shoot a bird that's well within range.
Yeah.
And you see that bird go stone cold and you're like, "Wow, I just did that with a 28 gauge." It's like you almost have it's like an expectation thing. You have lesser expectations because it's this little old 28 gauge that can't at all kill like a 12 gauge, and then you see it kill like a 12 gauge and you kind of want to build it up, sort of put it on a pedestal, right? But it's actually I think it's a lot more simple than that. It's actually that you just threw 373 pellets and hit a bird with 30 of them versus maybe hitting them with 5 number 6 pellets or something. I mean, yeah, that bird is going to look like it just ran into a brick wall.
And that's the main thing that you got me with. You were telling me this, and then that was a catalyst for me to go interview Dell.
Yep.
And learn more about it, because for anybody kind of picturing that, well, why does this really matter? Picture a patterning plate, and you draw a circle, and our objective, what we would like to do, is black out that patterning plate, that entire circle. We want to fill in with as many holes from the pellets that we can. So if you have more pellets in the shell, and they're all, choked and spread out the same way, of course, like you said, different types of shot are different, but just generally speaking, if you're throwing more pellets downrange at that, 20, 25 yard magical number of the distance,
Yep.
if you're throwing more pellets than what you can in a 20 gauge shell at, 7s or 7.5s, odds are you're going to hit the bird a little bit better with more pellets. So it makes up for whatever you think you're losing on the size shot. And it's funny, I was telling you, like, I just got back from Montana. That was kind of where I broke in my shotgun.
Yep.
To your point, I have the 28 gauge on a 20 gauge frame because I have the 20 gauge barrel swap. And I'm breaking it in. I go out there and I'm like, I'm putting Larson and Dell's theory to the test here. I'm still not bought in, right? I'm like, all right, I'm not a shotgun junkie, but we're going to give this a go. And I killed one of each species with the same exact load, 3/4 ounce, 28 gauge. I think it was 7.5s if I remember correctly. Yeah. And, but what was interesting is I also swapped to the 20 gauge, a couple days in, because I wanted to try both, just see it side by side with exchangeable chokes. The 28 is this fixed cylinder and improved cylinder. Yep. With the 20 gauge, I'm like, I have the ability. I can change chokes. I can play with this however I want. What I find interesting is I was more effective with the 28 gauge over the 20 gauge. And there's a lot that can go into it. Yeah. It's form, condition, whatever. Like, there could be a million reasons why that was, that I'm crippling birds with 20 gauge, but with a 28 gauge, they're dying. Yeah. And all I need to know is that the 28 gauge is more effective. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm shooting with more confidence. I'm more comfortable with it. But to your point, like, why am I killing more birds with a 28 over a 20 gauge? And I'm not saying all this to say that, like, hey, if you have a 20 gauge, go get a 28 gauge. But just understand that, like, for years, I mean, me, we would talk shotguns and you would see my eyes glaze over, right? You would see it in real time.
It wasn't lighting you up.
Yeah, it wasn't lighting me up until you started speaking my love language.
Pellet count.
Pellet count. And it's like, then I bought in, and now I'm sitting here. I'm an advocate. Like, yeah, it makes a difference. Yeah. I can attest to it. I've witnessed it, and it opened my eyes to where, like, when people talk about wanting to be successful in this, and it doesn't have to be rough grouse hunting, just upland hunting in general, or any hunting in general, is like stuff like that. The attention to detail, the figuring out the little small differences, they add up. And so if you want to be successful, whether you're inclined to like shotguns or don't, I would say that I'm probably the rare one in the upland space that, shotguns isn't my thing. Yep. But the effectiveness is. And so it's like when you find something that can really improve how you go about doing this, it's worth studying a little bit more, and it's worth looking into, because now I'm sitting here like, man, I should have looked into this 3-4 years ago when you were trying to talk to me about it, but instead
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, I got a shot. It shoots.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and yeah, again, as much as I love the 28 gauge, I talk to customers every day. I I'll say this, like, I feel like I talk more people out of a 28 gauge than into it, because if you a couple of things. One, to kind of firm up the point that you're making, it was the same realization that I came to, which was that I was primarily shooting 20 gauges. I switched one season 20 gauge, the 20 gauge RFM very well fit gun. Next season 28 gauge RFM very well fit gun. I shoot it like pretty close comparison, right? Close to apples and apples there. What I realized very quickly into that season that I started shooting the 28 gauge was that my effectiveness was unchanged in the grouse woods. So once I realized that the shots that I am already self-selecting for, the shots that I want to take, the shots that I'm shooting at, I felt no less effective with my 28 gauge than my 20. So that's when I kind of just adopted.
So it wasn't that the 28 was more effective; it was just the same effectiveness.
It was the same effectiveness, and I do keep track of my shooting percentage, so I know that, and it actually was very consistent from one year to the next. I will say, last year, I just this whole thing. I went like 3 years without actually. I take notes about my hunts, shooting percentage, flush counts, all that stuff. I went like 3 years without adding anything up and summarizing at the end. It was my goal before this season started to do that. I did it last season, and I kind of had an idea that this was going to be the case. Last season was my most effective season ever, shooting percentage wise, with a 28 gauge. And again, I don't think it's not because I'm shooting a 28 gauge. It is because that the shots that I take are fully within the capabilities of a 28 gauge. Sorry. So what you have to keep in mind is range, and the ranges that we typically shoot at in the grouse woods. The amount of you're not shooting far enough for your pattern to thin out to the point to render a 28 gauge ineffective. If you're taking 40 or 50 yard shots and you are throwing size 8.5 pellets, you could test that, but I've realized that in the shots that I take, I'm not at the outer range. In fact, I know, because there's some shots that I take that I don't think it's not in my wheelhouse, but I will stone cold kill a bird. And the little examples like that where it's like, well, okay, yeah, I know. And yeah, there's the whole golden pellet thing, but I'm pretty conservative in my shooting to where the 28 gauge is as effective for me as the 20 gauge in the shots that I take.
So you just came back from North Dakota,
Yep.
the prairies. Did you change anything on that?
When I go out there, I shoot 7.5 shots.
So 8s, 8.5s here in the grouse woods, 7.5s out on the prairie.
A little bit bigger bird, but I will say this too. Like, I feel like the sharp tails that I shoot on my early season, they're as close as any rough grouse I can. Like,
right.
Most of the sharp tails that I shoot at, if they get up, like on the hill over there, like I don't shoot.
Yeah.
I just don't shoot, and I don't feel bad. Like, there's nothing wrong with not taking a shot that you're not comfortable, right? Like, that's gun safety 101. But so it's just, and I don't think this is where the point I was making about talking people out of a 28 gauge. If you call me up and you say, I want a gun that can kind of go anywhere, do anything upland wise, at the top of the heap is the 12 gauge. There's nothing more effective than the 12 gauge, because you can shoot the heaviest payload. You can send the most pellets downrange without. We didn't fully flesh this out, but as you cram, you can shoot 3-inch shells, right? We can do all this stuff, and we could do a separate podcast. We could stop it and start recording another one here. You can cram as many pellets as you want down that barrel, but there are diminishing returns, and there was a study done by, I think, Federal Ammunition, that for me, it's like a foundational piece in my mind. I talked to Phil Bergeli about this. He was on site when they did this study. The bigger the bore, the more efficient the pattern, meaning that the bigger your bore size, the more pellets you can throw downrange while maintaining pattern efficiency. And pattern efficiency is even disbursement and shortening the shot string. If your shot string gets like this, you can have where a bird flies through and maybe some of the pellets at the front hit it, but then the bird's gone, and then the rest of your pellets come through. That's shot string, and that is something that, again, you do a lot of patterning. Somebody like Del Whitman can go into this. He has done the math on a lot of this stuff and how relevant it really is. But from a theory perspective, the bigger the bore, the more efficient the pattern. So there's nothing more effective than a 12 gauge, but can the 16, the 20, the 28 be as effective for the shots that you take in your hunting? And most of the time it can. So when people say, let's say I don't want a 12 gauge, I want an upland gun, which is usually a sub gauge. And by sub gauge, that's 16, 20, 28. I kind of think there's really nothing more practical than a 20 gauge because of ammunition availability.
Right.
With a 20 gauge, you can find less expensive ammo, and you can shoot. It's kind of hard to. I feel like it's kind of hard to find like 3/4 ounce load. They used to make. There's some ammo makers that would make a 3/4 ounce load of 20 gauge. You could find them, but it's not really that prevalent. Michael McIntosh used to write about this a lot. He would. There's an article in one of his shotguns and shooting books, which I love those books, where he challenges people to shoot a payload less than the standard payload of your gauge. So if you're shooting a 28 gauge or 20 gauge, standard payload is 7/8 ounce. He kind of challenges readers to shoot a 3/4 ounce load and go out there and see what it does. And I think you would find this same thing that I did going from a 7/8 ounce load of 20 gauge to a 3/4 ounce load of 28 gauge. Lo and behold, I just had my most effective shooting percentage ever by shooting a well-fit gun that placed the pattern where I wanted it to go. More often than not, that was successful, right? So the idea that we are sold bigger, faster, stronger a lot of times with ammunition, and in my experience, that is not the way to go. Less is more when it comes to shotguns in a lot of cases, and that's where the 28 gauge really kind of shines. To bring it all the way back around, it was the logic of the pellet count that kind of rooted that for me and gave me like the foundation to, I'm going to give this a shot, and I'm going to actually go shoot 8.5 shot out of this 28 gauge. And yeah, I've been shooting that for 2 or 3 years now, and it's very effective.
Yeah. It would be interesting. I need another hobby, like I need a hole in the head, but I would love now to experiment with reloading and coming up with my own shot and comparing it. But that's, like you said, we can hit record on that podcast another day.
Yeah.
So we shot the bird now. We found the bird. We shot the bird. The recovery of the bird. This is something that's really interesting, especially when you go into different areas with different types of upland hunters and whatnot. There's people put different emphasis on different things on dog work in general, but especially on retrieving, right?
Yeah.
So you shot a bird. I think a lot of people out there, and there's something to be said about the conservation of game, finding the game that, that being a priority for dog owners. I know it's a priority of mine. We've talked about this offline. Where are you at on the recovery of the shot bird when it comes to dog work?
Yeah, neither of my setters are what you would call natural retrievers. Rose has more natural retrieve than Hartley, but both of my dogs are, the one thing that we work on is hunt dead, finding birds, finding crippled birds. And this was, again, something I learned with dogs, just like following up shots, birds that you did not think you hit, and going in that direction and finding a bird. And when it comes to like the development of that, like I don't really do anything other than in those early stages. With Hartley, obviously, I would have really had no clue. So I kind of learned this as he progressed and developed. With Rose, it was a little different because I had seen more. But just shoot a bird, get it down, and kind of walk to where you think it is. Like, okay, so I drop a bird, I can see it, it's dead, it's right there, right? You go over there and dead bird, dead bird, dead bird, kind of that thing, and just that repetition. And both of my dogs, they will come in, and when I say that, they immediately tighten up and they start looking in that area. And ideally, most of the times, I kill a bird, I hit it with that 3/4 ounce payload of 8.5, and the bird does run into a brick wall in the sky and falls down. Both my dogs will run over there and they'll be on the bird, like before I even have time to even say dead bird. If that doesn't happen, if the bird is winged or crippled or whatever, we're going in that direction, and I'm basically saying hunt dead. And just, it's almost like amazing to me, like just by sheer repetition of saying dead bird when I think I've got a dead bird down, how my dogs have learned to tighten up and search here where I think it is. And I mean, there's like certain tracks come to mind. I can think of like Hartley and Rose, like finding certain birds that I can't believe we found, but by pursuing them, it's that hunt dead ability. And I would I like my dogs to bring my birds right back to hand? Yes, I see that, and it's just like it's a beautiful thing to have a dog run out, grab a bird, bring it back to me. I just have not put the work in the off season to make that happen. Rose like will reliably, she'll go over, pick up a bird, and she prances around, but like she has like a bubble, like she doesn't want she doesn't want me in that bubble. So like now I kind of will just stand there and let her prance around with the bird a little bit, and I'll walk over there and eventually get it. But there's so many different ways that can play out. Like if the bird falls down where you can see it,
Yeah.
that's a different situation than taking a shot at a bird and having, say, zero evidence of hit or miss.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that always, I, it you get nervous because to me, there's like no worse feeling in the world than dropping a leg on a bird or something like that and knowing that you hit it and not recovering it, which does happen. And I hate it so much, but I make the effort to try to find those birds, and it's unfortunately it happens where sometimes they do get away, and that pretty much sticks with me the rest.
It's part of it.
Right.
Right. I mean, you're gonna take the risk. You're not, and I mean, I'm sorry. The person listening to this, if my dog's never lost a bird, you're lying.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you truly believe that, you're forgetting something.
I just don't think there's any way that you can know that 100%.
You can't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen my dogs. Like my dogs, they retrieve and very well. I would say, when relatively speaking to other people's dogs, and I know for a fact my dogs have lost birds, especially if you cripple them and, there's no telling where those birds go.
Yeah.
My dogs have recovered vastly more birds than to your point, thought I even hit.
Yeah.
It's, I'll shoot and I'm like, dang, I was behind it. I missed it. And, then here comes Rachel or Lucy. Here you go, Dad.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's no worse feeling than like, oh, I stoned that bird. Where the heck is it?
Yep.
I'm curious, it's to your point, your dogs hunt dead, you recover vastly more. I give you credit to where I think you might be one of the best markers I've seen of a down bird that I've been, but I think you've credited that to your time spent without a dog. It was kind of a necessity, to where it's like I've been in the woods with you now multiple times where a bird goes down and like you're vastly more accurate with the general vicinity of the area than me.
Yeah.
But with all that being said, do you think on the next dog, do you think retrieving is going to be more of a priority for you? Do you ever see yourself giving it more of an honest, like, all right, we're gonna put this skill set on you, or do you just kind of, hey, I need you to go find the bird and I'll take it from here kind of mentality?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I think I should probably talk to some more people as far as like what else could I be doing to coax that out of them? Because like I've proven to myself that like I guess I don't really have the discipline to like sit and do force fetch with my dogs. Like
Right.
that's just like something that I have not done. It's not to say that I would never do it, but to this point I haven't done it. And I think it's kind of like going back to that pellet count thing. Like there's just there's a tipping point to where like okay, I got a problem here. Like I'm hitting these birds and we are not coming like it is that is not a a a thing that is happening with enough frequency where I feel like there's clearly a fault of me or the dogs here that needs to be addressed. It's I feel like when it happens, it is this is like it's kind of subjective, right? But I
Right.
feel like when it does happen to us, there's really it was a bad gun mount, whatever it was, dropped a leg on the bird and he sailed over the ridge and we went over there and it's like happens with sharp tails from time to time and we just didn't find that bird and like I it went over the ridge. I don't know where it is and like we're going in the direction and at some point I mean I've got some examples of like birds that we found miraculously. There were two last season that remember they were both with Rose. Rose was on point. Walking on a trail, Rose goes on point. This grouse gets up in front of me and I shoot. I've never seen more feathers come off of a grouse and seen it keep flying than this
You just
particular
shot the
bird.
tail fan off of
And the
it.
sun was coming down. It was like poof, like and the bird kept flying and my heart immediately just sinks because it wasn't coming down. It kept flying. And I went up there and I'm just kind of in disbelief and we go into our hunt dead and we're looking around and I'm walking back and forth and I'm creating the area and I'm looking and there's feathers on we don't see anything like I don't know how long we looked but eventually we start walking and we're kind of going in the direction of the bird because that's the way I wanted to go and it's like well we're going to go this way and hopefully we can find this bird but it's like I had broken out of the bubble where it was like Rose hunt dead, Rose hunt close, hunt dead, that kind of thing. But we're back hunting. I bet we went it wasn't a crazy distance but I bet we went 150 yards and turned into this there was actually a private land boundary, so I actually had to turn. And so this is just like kind of a crazy coincidence. I have to turn. I go like another 50 yards. We're probably, I think I measured it on Onyx. We were at least 150 yards from where I shot the bird. We start walking down this corridor, and Rose locks up on point. And I was still close enough where I was like, okay, maybe something. But I was ready, thinking like this bird might have enough life left in it. Walked up and she's pointing 2 feet away from a grouse that's basically the life is just leaving it
Done. Yeah.
and found it. That's one that's not crazy wild, but I feel like we were lucky to find that bird, but we kind of did our process. Like there's a process that we have following up in that direction and maybe you find the bird, maybe you don't. In this case, we did, and there's no better feeling in the world than
Right.
finding that bird that I know I hit. We found that. Another time earlier last season, this one can't even make it up. Rose is on point. We were into birds. I think I had killed one already. She goes on. She's kind of like going from grouse point to grouse point. She goes on point. I circle around, and I've got the perfect situation. Rose is on point. I'm looking dead at her, and this grouse is in between us. It flushes. It's flying right kind of 45-degree over me like this. I shouldn't have shot. I should have turned and shot going away, but I shot right here and I hit the back of it. Like dropped, I don't know if I dropped a leg, but I know I hit the bird and it kept going hard that way. We turn around and again, this is not a good situation because I know that bird's not hit well enough to come down. We start walking and we start looking and we looked for a good long while. It went down into a pretty thick sprucey conifer swamp. We're looking down there and I went 100, 150 yards, kind of keeping Rose close in that corridor. And it's just like, there's so many things going through your head. Like, yeah, this is a straight line, but there's nothing that says the bird had to say on a straight
Right.
line, right? Like the
Yeah.
bird could just be 50 yards over there dead. And I'm just going this way. There's only so much you can do in those situations. So we go that way. She looks and she got birdie a couple times, I think. Don't find the bird. And I keep moving. And this time it was a much greater distance that I walked. And like I've already have to accept the fact that I'm not finding this bird. Like we didn't find it. I took a stupid shot and I didn't kill the bird. So we're walking, and this is really. I'm walking and Rose is off. She's off hunting again. Like this bird is gone, and I'm walking and I kick a hazelbrush whip that shoots out and comes right back and catches me right between the legs. One of the worst ones that I've ever had. It happens from time to time.
We've all been there.
This is one of the worst ones I've ever had. I dropped to my knees. I was not feeling good. And I remember like I was kind of having fun with myself. I was in pain, but I was like, I deserve this.
I deserve
like,
it. Yeah.
I just
karma.
wounded a girl. Like I absolutely deserve this. I like kind of regain my composure and like get up and start walking. At this point, I have no sense of direction. I don't know that I'm still on the line of the bird. I don't know anything. I'm walking, and I'm just going along through this heavy pine swamps. All of a sudden, Rose goes on point 100 yards to my right, immediately to my right, and I was going this way. She goes on point to my right, so what do? I turn to go to my dog on point. I walk 20, 30 yards, and I walk right up to a dead grouse laying in the ground, which I found for not because of my dog, or I found for no other reason than just dumb luck. And I found that bird. So what does that have to do with dogs hunting dead? Or
Yeah.
That's just the kind of weird stuff that happens in the grouse woods sometimes. And again, it made my day, like just turned my day upside down, right? Like I was not in a good state of mind. Recovered the bird, and all was right with the world in some sense. But
I think anybody that's been doing this upland hunting thing has similar situations. I mean, even with me, with my emphasis on the dog training and the skill set of retrieving in general, I have those stories as well. I mean, the first one you're talking about, just she going and pointing over there and you going to find it. Rachel did the same thing to me in Idaho last year, chucker hunting. Covey Rise gets up, I shoot the bird, I think it goes straight ahead, and I keep sending her. And the first two times, like I send her and she goes and does her thing and then comes back. That's not like her. I resend her and she goes out for a shorter amount of time, comes back to me. And I'm like, where's the bird? Like, You don't not bring me the bird. This is you go get me my bird. And I start sending her and she keeps wanting to veer off left. She's wanting to go left. And it's so funny. Like I kick myself now because I'm always preaching on the podcast, trust the dog, trust the dog. And in this instance, I've got blinders on and I'm like, no, in my head, and I'm getting more stubborn, like convincing myself that bird dropped where I thought it went.
Yeah.
And so me being the idiot that I am, it's just like she's not wanting to go. I'm like, I'm going to go prove to my dog this bird's down there. And I go down there. I'm like, I can't find the bird. I release her 150 yards to my left. She goes on point for a split second. And what gets up but a crippled chucker. It can't fly, but it's hopping around, and I'm just sitting here like, you moron. Like this is why, again, everything I preach to everybody, I'm just as guilty as everybody else. But that retrieving thing, it's to your point, it's just like sometimes my buddy Jacob, he was telling the story last year. He shot his first grouse with his draught TIG, and he was disappointed because he couldn't find the bird. And Tig's a retriever, again, very similar, very well trained. And they finally give up, and he takes a break and sits down under a conifer tree. And he's just sitting there like, damn, I finally shot my first grouse, and I can't find it. What falls out of the tree in his lap but the grouse? Right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that you can't make up. Like you said, it's just like the strange things that happen out there in the world of upland hunting. But we've recovered the bird now, okay?
Yeah.
Where are you at on the food aspect? Is this something that, I don't think I've heard you talk too much about? Like, where are we at? Like, do you have a freezer full of them? Are you one that really appreciates and enjoys the cooking of it? Like, just what do we do with the bird after we recover it and you get back to the tailgate and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, this is, I I obviously love eating grouse. I am a when it comes to being a chef, I'm not a chef, and I'm a very like I'm a plain vanilla guy. Like I if I like something, I find something I like, I kind of stick with it, and I do that with a lot of things in life. But with grouse, for the longest time, I'll just I just kind of I'll breast them out, strip up the breasts, saute that in butter and onions, salt and pepper. I'm a pretty happy guy. I have, because of doing the podcast, I interviewed Hank Shaw, and I spend time around people that are much more,
Versed.
yeah, versed and like culinarily applied, if that's a word. Uh, like I get curious about that stuff, like anything else. So I have experiment, and you have sort of fueled that in me a little bit. I've plucked some birds now.
Mm.
Hank Shaw talks about that. I I will try everything. I plucked a few grouse last year and tried to do the like a roast grouse. I did it in the oven. I did it in the instant pot. Actually, was really happy with how those turned out. So I will do that too. But something I gave up because I sort of felt like, gosh, I don't know if I should do this, but like just breading and frying the grouse, the breast. I started doing that again last year because my boys are getting to the age where
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
they eat chicken nuggets, and then let's try this. And actually, I used to overcook grouse that way, and I thought they were good. Like I like recall like cooking them that way in college, like with put them in shore lunch or whatever, and you eat them and they're good, but they weren't really good. But I have found that using a meat thermometer while I'm doing that, and like making sure that you do it just right, they turn out amazing. So I've kind of been experimenting with like different breadings and stuff, and
Have you
again,
tried like panko bread
I've
crumbs?
done
Okay.
I've done that. Yeah, I'm kind of like right now I'm sort of like going through like the different breadings, and like I'll go to the breading
Yeah.
aisle in the grocery store and like try this one. My older son Hunter, he's 6 now, so like, and he really loves grouse. So we're kind of experimenting with that, and like I said, though, they love it. But I got this, like, it was like a butter rub that I tried for the roasted grouse. And the plucking experiment, man, I mean, you got to have some patience,
Yeah.
and but you can it is it's not a if you're doing it and you rip the skin, you don't have to just like throw the baby out
Toss
with the
it. Yeah.
bathwater, right? Like you can just kind of keep going. So I had to kind of coax myself through that, but you can get there. And I pretty much, it's like breaded grouse. If I don't do that, I've done wild rice and cream and mushroom. I've done all
Yeah.
that stuff, and I kind of like it all.
It
Uh,
doesn't taste bad. There's a
uh,
reason why people do it.
yeah,
Like, not everybody would keep doing it if it tasted bad, but it's just kind of like, all right, well, let's
yeah,
try something new, right? My
yeah,
problem is I'll try new stuff with all of these different types of breadcrumbs. I don't write anything down,
yeah,
and then I don't remember what I've tried, and I don't remember how I've done it. So it's very oftentimes I'll try something that I think is new, and then in the middle of it, be like, I've tried this before,
yeah,
and it turns out as well as it did the first time. But that's
yeah,
why it's not as memorable. But that's funny. I mean, it's some people really appreciate the culinary. Like, what brings everybody to this is completely different and unique as to each person, and so I find it. I love being around people to see what they do
yeah,
with the bird afterwards, and that's oftentimes how I figure out like what I like to do or don't do. But everybody's completely different, and to what degree. And I think there's some people out there that will bash everybody for, if you don't pluck your bird, you're
right,
evil.
right,
If you can salvage more meat, like, I'm a big believer, and I think I told you this years ago. Like, man, just throw the legs in a bag, right?
yeah,
Like, breast them out. If you want to breast them and you don't want to pluck them or shot to crap and back or whatever, like, yeah, breast them, but throw the legs in a bag and accrue it, and then do a big giant vat of crock pot of legs
Yep.
and just slow cook them, and then you get grouse tacos. I mean,
Yep.
it's great. But yeah, each their own. It's it kind of gets into what do you like to eat or don't like. But talking to the beginner on this rough grouse thing, like rough grouse is a wild chicken.
Yep.
Like white meat, if you like chicken, whatever, fill in the blank, take rough grouse and substitute that into your recipe, and you're good.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Don't overcook it. And, like that's the thing. Like I don't think I've ever had a wild game that I didn't like. I mean, I'm not picky. Like I say, like I'm not a chef, but I'm also not very picky. Like it just doesn't take that much to make. Like I go out and kill some birds and I bring them home and me and my boys eat them. Like I'm pretty dang happy whether they're breaded or plucked and roasted and all that stuff. But don't overcook it. And wild game is amazing. Wild game is delicious, and it can be prepared in a way that how many times do you hear people say that woodcock are terrible?
I love it.
I
I
mean,
love woodcock.
I don't have your taste buds. I don't know, like I don't know what your experience is, but I just hear that and I'm just like, man, that's definitely not my experience. I love woodcock and turkey legs. Like this is something where I don't have any history with turkey. Like the amount of people that I hear say like, "Oh, you just breast out a turkey leg." There's so much meat on turkey legs. Like I took Hank Shaw's turkey. He has this, of course, very intricate turkey carnitas that he uses for his legs. I took that, made it as simple as I possibly could, and I use that for turkey legs, sharp tails. I've tried it with grouse. I think it actually works better with dark meat. The way that I do it works better with the darker meats. But my whole family loves we make taco meat out of wild turkey legs or sharp tail breast. Anything. I mean, find a way that
You
that
can make
works
a
for
taco
you.
out of anything. You
Pretty,
get a tortilla,
it's kind of hard to mess that up.
yeah, it's kind of hard to mess it up. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's one of those. I used to what got me into this initially. Like I was much more motivated by the food at the very start of
Yep.
this, and I think I would if I still had the time available that I did then. Right? It's just I could spend all day like churching up a nice fancy recipe, and I still appreciate the days that I can. But now it's like I'm very much a simple kind of guy. Like
Yep.
butter, salt, and pepper, maybe some onions, like you said. It's like it's very simple and clean and quick and painless. But
Yeah. I think what you said there, like a lot of people do. I think in the last 10 years we've seen this. Like a lot of people do. If it's adult onset hunters, a lot of them are motivated by food. That wasn't my entry to hunting. My
yeah,
entry to hunting was a 10-year-old boy just absolutely fascinated with grouse and grouse hunting. And so the food is kind of a new frontier for me in a way. Like I've always eaten grouse and and but now is kind of my time to like play around with a little bit and like learn a little bit about like cooking and temperatures, and that's like a newer thing for me, kind of like the shotgun and the 28 gauge stuff. It's another area.
that's exactly what I was about to
Yeah.
say. Is everything that you do in life, anything that you want to look into, there's you can call it the right way or wrong way to do it, but there's a science behind it.
Yeah.
There's reasoning behind it. And so like if you really like or you're curious about it and you want to try it, spend 5-10 minutes googling it and just get a simple download of whatever information it is, because no matter what it is, cooking, obviously there's a science behind it. And to your point, like a meat thermometer to tell you when a meat is done, who would have thought, right?
For a guy like me, it's like that's
Right.
it. Yeah, it's like that's what makes me like, what are these people doing that I don't like? What am I missing here?
Yeah.
I'm driven to understand what is this obvious thing that I could be doing and learn from, and that's what I'm always trying to pay attention
Yep.
to.
Well, in that vein, as you know, you listen to the show. I close out every show now, kind of throwing it to the guests to kind of see where did I miss. There's something here that maybe sparked your interest. Is I'm curious to see like what is something that we miss in this topic of rough grouse 101, if you will. What's something that we didn't touch on that we should have?
Well, one thing that we kind of moved on from, and I wanted to sort of like say what when we're talking about maples and like I don't like maples forests and maple stands, and I don't hunt them. There's a lot of things that I do, and I try to be aware of this, and I feel like this is one of the things that helps me learn. There are certain things like I get into. We all get into patterns and routines, and you have this sort of confirmation bias. Like I am self-selecting where I find grouse because I go to places where there's not a maple stand, right? But that does not mean that you can't walk that maple edge and find. I've never found a crop full of maple spinners.
Really? Okay.
No, and I'm like curious. Like I would like to see a grouse crop full of maple spinners because I don't think
I've never
seen
seen one as full as like the catkins or
Yeah.
the salad or anything like that, but I've definitely, and again, it could go back to the conditions of that year. Like maybe it's too dry to where
Mhm.
there's not. I remember vividly, I was hunting with Tim. I did an episode with him on taxidermy afterwards, Tim Perkins,
Yep.
and I remember hunting with him, and we both like around the same moment in the walk, like there's no food anywhere because it was so bone dry.
Yeah.
And then we got into maples and shot grouse there. So maybe they're eating the spinners that day or that time period because there was, availability wise, there was not much.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is just like what I would say. I kind of pride myself in having an attitude of I don't have all the answers. And I do certain things a certain way. I have information, I have lots of experience, I have lots of things to share, but I definitely do not have all the answers. And I try to, as much as I can, sort of take a step back. Where are my blind spots? What am I missing? What can I learn from this person or this podcast guest or this person that I'm hunting with today? And I think, I mean, that's a healthy way to go about life and to learn things. So like I say one thing but that doesn't mean that's not the definitive way to do everything. It's something, but it's not everything.
Yeah. And that's not to say that in a year's time, your opinion of that or outlook doesn't change.
Correct.
And I think what you just said is huge, and it's a testament to the longevity of your show, the Birdshot Podcast, and how long you've been doing this. As it speaks to your curiosity, and there's been things on your show just the same as my show, where we kind of spin where we think we're going one direction, and then 2 years removed, we're like, you know what?
Yeah.
I did not think of that in the correct light, or things have kind of
I got
developed.
new information now.
Yeah, new information.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily flip flopping, but it's just like, oh, I wasn't aware this information's out there, and there's no telling what is it we're speaking about today that will be in the same vein in a month. But
Yeah.
one thing I do know that I want to touch on as we close this out, we've kind of talked about this from a good perspective of this, going down the gear path, is the marshware clothes.
Yep.
And what's been your takeaway from testing out some of this marshware gear this year?
Yeah, it's I did not know what marshwear clothing was. Like I don't know, maybe it was like a year ago when we started working with them. But I've had the good fortune of testing out a lot of it now, and for like the things that I do, I wear a lot of marshwear clothing now. Honestly, it's great stuff. I was totally unaware of the brand, and everything that I have from them is it's been awesome to try.
Same way with me. I mean, they approached us around the same time. I didn't really have any expectations like you. I didn't know about it.
Yeah.
But you look at it, it's like, yeah, some good looking gear. To your point, I've been pleasantly surprised
Yep.
at the durability, the comfort of it, and my wife has appreciated the looks of it. She talks quite often how like, I'm no longer in just blue jeans, boots, and a t-shirt, right? She's just like, you actually look presentable. I can take you into public.
Yep.
But I don't think that one thing I do appreciate them is they're not going to go out there and claim that you can go stomp around in Georgia brambles and blackberries and the briars looking for bobwhite quail. They're not pretending to be like the hardcore hunting gear. But if you have a Western hunt nice early season hunt or even rough grouse, I've been wearing nothing but marsh wear on this trip, and it's holding up pretty damn well. Like
Yeah.
I'm really happy with it. So that Wheeler jacket is pretty sweet. I know I've talked about that before, but that's the standout piece for me at least is the Wheeler jacket. But I thought it was worth noting because you and I both have multiple times throughout the day in the past few weeks like this stuff is pretty freaking nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Sitting here in this room, this is the family cabin, and right now it's grouse season, so it's hunting camp. But we spend a lot of time here in the summer, and like marshwear clothing for me, it kind of like it bridges the gap from everyday life to the outdoor lifestyle. Like whether you're on the water, going for a hike through the woods, it's just kind of the stuff that I turn to again because I have a bunch of it now, and I have the ability to wear it. It's the kind of clothing that sort of adapts. Like their whole thing is it's presentable, stylish. Again, we're not wearing blue jeans and cut off T-shirts as you and I have a tendency to do, but it's the kind of stuff that you can wear on the lake and go out on the boat, and you can run in town, go to the bar, whatever, look presentable. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. As we close out this infomercial, is there a piece that speaks out to you that you really particularly enjoyed, whether it's for functionality and hunting or just kind of lounging about?
Well, I am wearing the escape pants right now. I like those a lot. They're like a hiking pant would probably be the best way to say it. Lightweight, sort of a kind of a performance fabric, stretchy, breathable. And for me, again, that's like I'm in the office and it's midday. I'm going to take my dogs for a hike through the woods. Like I don't have to go get changed, whatever. I'm wearing the escape pants, run into town, pick up my son from school, that kind of thing. I always have kind of wanted a field coat. I don't really hunt in heavy coats a whole lot. I go to like, and some of the marshwear stuff, like some of the shirts I've been wearing in the early season heat. But the Wheeler jacket that you mentioned, that the field coat, that's kind of just like your camp jacket, sitting around the campfire.
Yeah.
Get all the pockets. It's sort of the classic field coat style. That one I love.
Nice
But
little small game vest on the back
yeah,
or game pouch, and I
yeah.
told you I've used it on a couple small little woodcock hunts. You know,
Mhm.
something that you're not going to carry a whole bunch of water with, but you have 15, 20 minutes to shoot out real quick with your dog, and you don't want to carry the vest and all that stuff. It's
Yeah.
pretty nice. But just wanted to throw that out there. The Marshwear, check it out. Check out the show notes. There's a discount code for you if you're interested. There's also a discount code on Patreon, a little bit deeper discount if you're interested in that. Nick, I appreciate it as always. It's always a pleasure when we get to link up and talk dogs and guns and birds and all that fun stuff. I appreciate you. It's almost like an annual tradition now for us to link up at some
Getting to
point
be.
in October.
Yep.
And again, the tables are set. We're gonna go out there and crush it tomorrow. I have that feeling. I think tomorrow is gonna be a special day. Let's leave the porcupines and bears and wolves at home. Let's just go out there and find some grouse.
Absolutely, man. It's always good to have you at grouse camp, and it's going to be a beautiful day tomorrow. We've got the day to spend in the woods. What could be better, my friend?